So, the team are all out of cross-fusion capable operators and PETs, and Nebula still has a bunch of Darkloids and dimensional area converters to burn through. You all know what that means.
We're all gonna die, starting with Griff.
No, it means it's time for the mid-season upgrade. Or, more accurately, it's time for the late-season upgrade. If this were a Kamen Rider or Super Sentai show, this would be where the Final Form or Ultimate Megazord combination would first show up in the better-paced shows. And by better paced, I mean they premiered it in the mid-30s to give it actual utility and proper placement in the Lensman's arms race, so the former unit can be appropriately power creeped so the end boss has a chance to be an appropriate end boss, instead of suddenly having a massively more powerful form to the point it makes the final form irrelevant even before it debuts Power Tier. Looking at you, Kamen Rider Build, and several other Toei series the last few years, that feels like pulling an 11th hour form debut to beat a bad guy, despite their purported final form debuting late, and foregoing a power struggle to succeed in saving the world. There's only a handful that have pulled that off in more recent years, and I can't actually claim that many of them have been good. Unfortunately, this is a Kenichi Yamada episode, meaning it is padded to hell and back. To the point that Neto actually does not get the PET upgrade to his advanced PE2 model until the next episode, which is overseen by Masashi Kubota. To Yamada's credit, however, as I've said, the guy is good with atmosphere, and the start of the episode certainly does give off the right tone of gloom, with Rockman being severely damaged from the consequences of the fight, and his PET being wrecked, so he's completely out of commission, while Yuichiro rebuilds his data. But the problem is, even Yamada's good stuff ends up redundant to better episodes that are supposed to be doing what his does, but he never gets around to focusing on. If the guy was a bit more focused in his storytelling, and in Rockman's case weren't so focused on him being in the Neto is an imbecile camp, he'd do far better than he's done in this show. But due to how his episodes tend to be dragged out and wasted with needless, unnecessary exposition, it never seems like he has the time to do better. Thankfully, this isn't an episode where Neto is treated as an idiot, but appropriately characterized as an only sane man. But Yamada still slips in some insults towards the kid regardless. Still, to help out, Raoul from Amberup shows up, and as Neto introduces him to his friends, we get a completely 100% redrawn flashback to their original encounter, instead of, say, reusing the clips that we have in Stockpile. And as a result of that, this redrawn flashback features the advanced model PET being in their possession, instead of the Mark II design that was featured in the first season of the .exe anime. Yeah, long story short on this one, this is a recurring animation error throughout the .exe anime, where any time, and I do mean literally any time, any type of flashback scene occurs in the series, if they end up redrawing the scene they flash back to instead of using its stock footage, or it takes place in a different time than the present, then whoever is animating the scene forgets about the previous PET models, despite the story itself saying that the given model of PET they're using at that moment was only released recently. Here, they have the advanced model PETs instead of the Mark IIs, but it gets even more ridiculous later. How ridiculous? Rockman's stream features a time travel episode plot that sends Rockman back a few decades, and one of the people he meets in the past has a Progress model PET that was featured in Battle Network 5. And in stream, it is declared that these were only developed for specific net agents and deputized individuals, meaning the person who has it shouldn't. Admittedly, that person also ends up becoming a time traveler, so you can sort of excuse it as the series entering timey-wimey territory with such a detail for that character, but the rest of the time, it is because the animation team didn't quite pay attention. My best explanation for why it happens is when they trade out art assets between the seasons to know what to tell their animation teams to draw, that they forget to keep references to the other equipment in the event of flashbacks or such timey-wimey nonsense happening. And nothing in the notes about the episodes are then there to say, hey, use a flashback to the prior show, or hey, use the model PET from the previous series as it happened at a time earlier than this series, as continuity outside of these errors still does apply. Raoul, however, is here hunting down a Darkloid known as Brightman, also known as one of the worst designed Navis of the .exe timeline, with him being one of the Navis mined from network transmissions content. And as he was coming over, Raoul heard about what's going on here and wants to help out. But unfortunately, Nebula can attack two places at once with the number of Darkloids under their command. And with Blue's corrupted and Rockman still recovering, they've not got a lot of resources to go around. Then again... They don't exactly need a lot of resources to deal with this dumbass. The fact they got Katsuyuki Konishi to voice him, though, well, frankly, I struggle to believe that due to the voice they used for this guy, because I cannot recall a time where he wasn't doing the deeper commander voice outside of maybe when he was doing the voices of Pokemon in the Pokemon anime. But yeah, it's just embarrassing police Navis are so easily beaten by this guy. I get him not being heavily damaged by electric attacks, he's an electric Navi as well, but everything else, not so much. The other Navi involved in this? Cold Man, voiced in Japanese by Shinji Kawada, who I know best as Makoto the Jinzo duelist from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Season 4, but others would know better as Magnius from Tales of Symphonia. Either way, he's not exactly high profile. Still, since the game's Cold Man is an antagonist Charo Navi, well, it makes sense the show actually calls in Searchman to deal with him by sniping the stratosphere. I, however, have! That's the Thunder Break attack used by the Great Mazinger. I mean, okay, if you're going to homage something, use the source, but still. Both Dark Lloyds are quickly forced to withdraw, resulting in Neto asking Raoul to help out by being deputized temporarily into the Net Police. Which Raoul refuses, even though he'll say he'll still help out. It seems to be more of an I don't trust the cops, but I trust my friends sort of thing with him. And considering the increasing number of spotlight abuses of power and reports of arrests for things that are not crimes by police, and also the number of convictions overturned recently by increased spotlight on police misconduct, yeah, it's hard to blame him. Unfortunately, because this is a Kenichi Yamada episode and Raika's here, well, as I said about Raika's last appearance, Yamada tends to write Raika as a complete asshole. This time the military man claiming that ordinary civilians aren't of use in comparison to a military man like himself, and dismisses Raoul as worthless. Which of course sets in motion, over halfway through the episode, the argument between the two. That Raika believes it's a mission for soldiers, and Raoul believes you don't need a mission to help people, as that's just common fucking empathy. What I hate about this is, despite this being a case where such could apply, it is not being presented as a matter of both sides are right, both sides are wrong. Which a good argument on this specific matter should be positioned. It's Raika insisting it's a military job to protect people because civilians should always be seen as defenseless children, regardless of what they contribute, and you're worthless without a military background. Whereas rules from an America equivalent where any nutjob can get a lethal weapon and murder people at their leisure, thus being capable at self-defense is a must, because the state has more and more since Reagan put protection of the self in the hands of solely the self, and criminalizes actually calling the police if you're in any way a minority. This should be presented as a proxy clash of cultural and societal differences, as opposed to the warring absolutes it's given as here, just to make Raika out as a complete jerk. As hell, it's not like Raika didn't start out as a capable civilian for him to then rise to the position he's in. That's not just training that results in that, and you can't obtain similar skills without regimental military training. Then again, this show seems overall to just be anti-military, which, considering this show came from Japan, is not exactly an inappropriate viewpoint. Regardless, phrasing. No, Yuichiro has found a way to speed up Rockman's repair, and make the pair of them more compatible with cross-fusion by using Neto's body as a mapped basis for Rockman's structural repair. This being an allusion once more to how the two are actually brothers in the game series due to Saito Hikari's reincarnation as Rockman. But because Neto's over here busy helping in his own way to rebuild Rockman, he's not going to be able to play middleman between the two character extremes that are taking focus this time, and their mutual job of stopping the two focused Dark Lloyds from attacking energy resources. The paired opposites both being equal at their execution of the task, even as Bright and Cold Man throw all obstacles they can in their respective ways. Raoul, managing to escape his own death trap without the assistance of his Navi, actually managing to impress Rika because the soldier actually required Searchman's help to escape his. Unfortunately, this still leaves them trapped in an oil refinery that Darkloids are priming to explode, ultimately making the two agree to put aside their differences, as there's no way they're dying next to each other. A bit petty, but if it works, it works. However, they're not the only Navis here, as we've got more network transmission transfers. Starman and Swordman coming in as well. Hi, Tetsu Inada! Kind of funny they cast him as a literal Swordman for this series, as at this point in time over on the Super Sentai side of things, the series Deca Ranger had premiered, and he was busy playing, and had even debuted as the Swordmaster Detective Doggy Kruger, aka Deca Master. If you look around, that dude is everywhere. What hinders these four Darkloids, however, is their infighting. These guys all hate each other, and are happy to screw each other over to get the kill. But their different tactics still put Thunder and Searchman at a disadvantage, despite this handicap. Ultimately, though, they realize it might be better to swap opponents to keep the Darkloids off their game. Searchman first shooting Swordman, and subsequent shots at Thunderman being reflected by Thunderman's EM control to hit the Darkloids when they're not expecting them, permitting Brightman's deletion, and convincing the others to retreat for the day. While the two operators remain at odds, there's at least a semblance of mutual respect built at the end of the day, all while Rockman's restoration is completed, just waiting for his new hardware in order to awaken. The wrap-up. We have plot-mandated asshole, once more to Rika. We have energy crisis, to the places the Darkloids were attacking. We have end of a nuisance, to Brightman's simultaneous introduction and erasure. Good riddance, and they were smarter on that than they ever were with Bubble Man. The downside to that is Brightman gets brought back later, only to be deleted again, and again, and again. And as much as I have voiced dislike of Yamada's episodes due to his writing cliches, this is not a bad one, as the grand majority of what made his episodes a nuisance is not present. Sure, the dialogue is still stilted in the way it's delivered, and it's too slow at the start, but by it being an episode focused on supporting characters, and getting Raoul involved so we can eventually give up Thunder Soul, frankly, we've had worse in this show. So while I'm not a fan of the guy's writing, I feel like I'm fair enough to admit that beyond the continuance of Rika being a jerk more than he needs to be, since his character arc ends up massively reversing over time, this isn't a bad one to space things out, and act as another two-part episode leading to the late season upgrade. See, this is slasher killer material. Aneta visits Scilab, only to find Neto stuck in his own head, and ends on busy helping Yuichiro finish the new PT model. And like so many prospective girlfriends in Japanese media, she doesn't like being ignored when she brought a wealth of homemade snacks. Because of course she'd be a no competence at cooking type of waifu. Curse you, Rumiko Takahashi, for popularizing that trope! Seriously, people, my personal annoyance at this trope is it actually is rather easy to make something simple and edible. Yes, there is an allowance for personal taste in making a concoction like this, but wow, does she need to work on, actually making it out look like a disaster? I don't know, maybe because my personal favorite hobby is making things, I might have a higher expectation towards that than others. It's a really messy sandwich. Regardless, Aneta gives them both a chance to express the helplessness they're feeling. Yes, Enzon can use the battleship gate, but neither of them know when the next Darkloid attack's going to happen. And with no special skills beyond his superb operating ability, well, Neto's feeling useless and unable to help resolve the situation without Rockman. And that's not exactly something he can change. As I've said before, Neto's the badass normal of the group. He's not a super genius or in possession of a special talent. Hell, the anime actually started him at more of a disadvantage than the other versions of him. What he's good at are all skills he's spent time to develop, and none of them are going to help if Rockman's not, accessible. But even then, Neto has to catch himself when he realizes who he is talking to, and remember what happened to Aneta's own Navi. and the object lesson she herself is providing to both of them in still trying to do what she can to help, even in a situation where no skill she has can directly assist in resolving the crisis. Again, for the anime incarnation, Aneta is top tier.
うまいでしょ意外だちょっとどういうことごめんごめん
Still, the Dark Lords going silent like this is not a good sign, meaning they're likely planning something big. And that's seen as Coldman and Swordman try to attack energy centers again in hopes of severing power to Scilab.
お前たちの好きにはさせないダークロイド
まんまとかかったなネット警察この攻撃はあくまで作戦の第一段階陽動に過ぎん
You didn't really need to tell us that, Regal. We're well aware of your methodology to use distraction tactics to hide the focus of your actual goals. Phase 2 is, of course, sending Dark Blues in via dimension areas to go after Scilab directly to physically destroy the new device. At the same time, Yuriko is explaining the new capabilities of it and how it was specifically designed to optimize the compatibility of synchrochips. But despite the device being ready to go, not every part of it is online yet due to an extended initialization sequence checking for any problems, meaning when the area forms and Blues enters the picture, to save their last chance to fight back, Aneta, who is closest to it, grabs the device and runs. While Enzon tries to use Scilab's internal security to give Aneta a chance to escape and circle back to them, Blues just too easily cuts through all the barricades, and in her panic, accidentally gives away where she was trying to hide. Enzon managed to use the ventilation system corridors to pull her out of sight, but Blues quickly picks up the trail again. Though with them trapped inside the dimensional area's dome, this is where Enzon realizes, hey, if a dimension area traps us in, and everyone outside of it, shouldn't that also work inside another dimension area? I don't know. If you try layering too many dimensions atop one another in the same active space, then you either end up warped to Beyondard or collapse them all into an amalgam universe. Fun fact, the letter is actually the overarching plot of Super Robot Wars Z, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 for that matter. But with this train of thought in his head, Enzon literally walks Dark Blues into the chamber Yuichiro used for his own dimensional area experiments before turning the contraption on, which does work to cage him in and prevent him from following. For that is Blues' Achilles heel. He's perfect for carrying out orders given to him, but as he's never been a free-thinking Navi, he's not very smart in outwitting other people. This is why he's a great enforcer, and in this case slasher villain, but can so easily be tricked as has happened here this entire episode. Play with your food for long enough, and you'll only end up prey yourself. The problem is, Blues has backup from Starman, who has also been realized and was just biding his time, Regal knowing that they could easily outwit Blues as he is. Fortunately, Neto shows up at this point, having had to take the hard way down, with Aneta handing over his new PT, and allowing him to finally counter them on their own level. And the difference in presented stats is massive. Starman's cosmic power actually completely ineffective. With all the stat improvements, it's almost as if they installed Hub Batch in the Navi customizer. But while Starman's instantly deleted, Blues gets free, and promises revenge! So while progress has been made, the Darkloid threat is far from over. Though at least with Aneta entering the cast more properly, we do have someone around to pop Enzon's ego bubble anytime he tries to act all cool and aloof, as he tries to here.
ネット警察から応援要請が来てるよ。よし、行くか、ロックマン。じゃあ行ってくるぜ、アネタ、エンザン。頑張ってね、ネット。
The wrap-up. We have slasher villain story to Dark Blues throughout this episode. We have 11th hour upgrade to the advanced PT2 and its significant augmentation of Neto and Rockman's cross-fused abilities. No big suit change, yet, that's next season, but you don't always need a new suit to show off a stat difference. This episode is much better than you think it might be on recap, simply because of the way Dark Blues talks and attacks everyone this episode. Without anyone possessing the ability to fight back here, you get a lot of tension presented as he's gone full slasher killer, with the cast having to play keep away with him until the PT2 is ready to use. Hell, while I skipped over it, there's a scene where he slowly stomps over to Enzan and Aneta as they try to use an elevator to get away from him. And while you might ask yourself, why isn't he running? Well, the answer is clear. They don't have anywhere to run to. Dark Blues spends the majority of the episode screwing with them, and playing pretend that they have a chance to get away, only for them to still be trapped in the dome while he can attack them simply at his leisure. That is insidious, sadistic, menacing, and damn effective, which is only subverted by the main cast using that predatory and sadistic arrogance to their advantage and turning the table on him. It's really the big highlight of it all, showing that you don't always need some huge, complicated mess to keep people engaged, but just a simple story of survival that'll keep viewers on the edge of their seats as we've been made to care about those going through these trials. The worst thing a writer can do is make an audience not care about the crisis of the individuals involved. That's one of the myriad reasons I've critiqued so harshly several of the episodes that hold the season back. They make me not care to watch anymore if I weren't reviewing the show. Here though, because of what's been built up beforehand with these characters, you do, and it's another big point in the season's overall favor. With Neto working to get used to the new abilities granted to him by his new PT, he and Enzan are once more back on the case of shutting down Darkloids. The episode starting with them hard countering Swordman and his 3 sword brains. I mean, he is a Santorio user, as they try to attack a fuel storage facility off of an airport, which quickly transitions to a battle in the real world where the powered-up cross-fusion Neto and Rockman make quick work of him once again. However, as Neto's giddy over the prospects his new device has for getting them ahead, and he's not even tapped the full power of them effectively yet, something both Neto and Enzan say and admit to, well, the episode is once again trying to sell Neto as getting too big for his britches, when he's really not acting it. Hell, he thanks Enzan for his assistance in utilizing the battleship gate to send him support ships, which he didn't have the time to load with Swordman attacking them. And it's not even in a thanks for helping show off how great I am kind of way. Neto legitimately is just happy to be back in the game and able to help people. That's not arrogance. Is he being a bit overbearing? Yes, but he's not taking all the credit for himself, which would require a popping of an ego. If anything, Enzan's the one who seems to have the problem, tied back to how he's stuck on the sidelines being support instead of an active fighter, and it's him that has the issue. But instead, Enzan calls in Raoul. I'm actually very thankful that translation note is here, as that is context not everyone would get with that analogy, and wasn't something that would translate. For everyone that hates when translators' notes would show up in fan subs and some official subtitles, well, this is the kind of thing they're supposed to be used for. Still, I have to say once more, taking pride in one's work is not a bad thing, and as this is the second episode about Neto somehow being depicted as arrogant and them needing to pop the bubble, well, again, I don't see it, and Neto still isn't showing the signs of being a self-aggrandizing, egotistical asshole. Overconfident, yes, I will agree to that. But as I've said before with how modestly the kid normally acts when he's being characterized correctly, is there that much wrong with taking a bit of pride in one doing well, as long as its success is addressed to the right source? After all, it's not like Neto ever went and said it's him that's responsible and no one else. Is he being sloppy by that over-reliance? Again, not really in this case, just giddy over a new asset. Thus, the lengths Enzan drags Raoul through to pop the non-existent ego bubble, yeah, I'm not a fan of that, nor the extensive ridiculous lengths they go to in thrashing him, which involves them going into full ridiculous Afro-sporting costumes and their own fake terrorist attack. Just talk to him. Ask him to tone down how much he likes this new piece of tech, get him understand through words that he's overdoing it, and that should resolve this matter. This is not a sitcom. Please don't make this into the various bad episodes of every sitcom ever. Kazuhiko Chiba brought us this one, incidentally, and while I really normally like the guy's work, I don't know. This is another one that doesn't sit quite right with me.
Mask the Thunder!
It's a Rockman! Come on!
Thunderball! Slapping! Electric slapping!
完結戦
おう、何をする？
ロングソー
俺の出番がないぜ！
But if you think Neto's taking this lying down, yeah, they've seriously misjudged him, as Neto starts pulling out the soul unisons we've not seen in quite a while. It's almost like most of the writers we've had to deal with don't like showing them off despite the utility in battle they afford.
実力を思い知らせてやるだけだガッツソウルは動きが鈍い
Yes he can. It's the entire point of the form. It's faster with using Gutsman's power than Gutsman himself is.
バルカン
今日のところはこのぐらいにしてやろう！
待てソウルユニゾンロールソウル
Yeah, this back and forth goes on for a while. And it's more and more shown that, yeah, it's Enzan that has the problem. He can't take being upstaged by Neto as he has been. And in the face of Neto's persistence against failure, well, Enzan's not getting the humiliation he wanted Neto to face, which this really is, as opposed to teaching Neto anything. It really does seem like it's about Enzan's ego being hurt, and not Neto's. But Enzan's whole deal here leaves them at a disadvantage when Swordman goes back to his last attack site, as the prior back and forth has resultantly exhausted too much of their resources, which risks everyone's safety. And again, this isn't on Neto for his stubbornness in burning through his battle chips in the battle they were in. Them making believe their assaulter was a Dark Lloyd put him in the mindset of, we have to beat them or else worse things will happen, which is the right mindset to have. He's being serious and taking these matters seriously all this time. No arrogance involved. But Enzan, of course, doesn't get this, instead making it seem like them stretching this all out was the problem, and causes them, while still in disguise, to go strike Swordman themselves to make up for their loss in capability to respond. However, Swordman's 3 sword heads and their swapping strategies are not an easy thing to deal with now that they're all out in the open and operating. Their attacks, though, reveal the disguise, with Thunderman's act to save Rockman awakening Thunder Soul, with a more extensive appearance change than the others have given. And as swords conduct electricity while rocks do not, the nefarious electric element proves to be their one true weakness. But getting the soul gives up who's in disguise and failing to teach an Aesop, because it really wasn't needed. Enzan just needed to tell Neto how his joy was making Enzan feel. And that would have resolved this without any of the hoops they went through. With this, Raoul returns home, while they're put back to work fighting Nebula. The wrap-up. We've got I've Got Soul for the acquisition of Thunder Soul. We have No Moral Theater for the unintended lesson about egos that backfired in Enzan's face. We have The Weapon Wields You for Swordman and his swappable strategic sword brains. This one is half and half on quality. On one hand, this is a bad sitcom plot any way around, with Enzan being the one with the problem, and Neto being oblivious to it as it isn't his fault. And the entire conflict caused by no one asking him to tone it down. On the other, it's not really bad in its execution, merely the premise of what gets Enzan to go off on him, and the framing that it's Neto with the problem instead of Enzan. At worst, Neto not realizing what's going on with the two in disguise is as dumb as he gets. And as he never gets close to them, this isn't the worst case on that, as in the distance with someone disguised, you're not going to make out all the details of people you know. Nor is Thunderman's masking poncho that egregious either. The fact the episode also calls Enzan out by showing he shouldn't have pulled this when Dark Lloyds were skulking around is good, as is Neto being willing to apologize, and that freely showing without having the moral beaten into his head that this could have been resolved just by talking to him, and again showing he was not the issue here. What it says it wants to do, and what others have said about it, pretty deeply differ from what it's actually showing. And if I'm recalling correctly from memory, this is one of those episodes that the dub did not handle well at all, and kind of screwed up the Aesop too. As if my memory is correct, the voice acting for the episode turned up Arrogant Lan to 11 to cover the more mild version seen here, which would then entirely reverse the actual Aesop of the episode. Again, since I don't have the dub episode anymore to check, my mind could be faulty on that, but that's the interpretation I remember, and the interpretation that keeps being written about the dub version that still makes its rounds. We have finally hit the episodes of Axess that were not dubbed, at least as far as any of us publicly know. Who knows, maybe the ones that got skipped are sitting in a box in Canada somewhere. It has happened before with series that got dubs and then didn't get all of their episodes on home video until decades later. Discotheque's rescue of Cyborg 009 or Ninja Robot's Tobikage being a perfect example of that. Regardless, Rockman's shown training against a trio of gutsmen like Navi drones, only for things to get wonky when Neto slots an East Wind chip, and for it to be way too powerful, with a mark on them suddenly appearing that's just straight abnormal. With Rockman, Roll, and Iceman, who is with them today, being swept over the rainbow, and ending up in front of Windman, who of course was going to show up sooner or later. The kids tried taking the affected ship to Higure to get answers, and to possibly track the path of where their navis went. Higure telling them it's a mark he saw at Shisaa Island, the southernmost island of Japan, when he stole a battleship that was laid out on display at a temple several years ago, that was subsequently purchased by Neto. Higure didn't catch that the chip was in any way abnormally programmed, because of course as established previously, Higure is a terrible depiction of an otaku, and thus everyone else is stuck with the mess of his making. Thus they've got to charter a trip to the titular island. Shisaa, by the way, are guardian lion dogs of Japan, originating from what was brought over from Chinese culture. While they're all over the country, they're most common in the southern Okinawan region. I think Shisaa Island as depicted in this episode is a fictitious place, as I looked it up and could not find anything on it. But while all that is happening, Rockman and company are being attacked by Windman, because that tornado caused them to intrude on the sacred net territory he is charged with protecting, and he doesn't care to stop to hear an explanation. At least until his operator, Ran Igarashi, intervenes as the reasonable one. It does not surprise me that much. Ran's actress Aya Hisakawa is best known for playing Amy Mizuno from Sailor Moon, and also Palutena from her Smash Brothers incarnation, and even Skuld from Ah My Goddess. Just keep her away from the booze, okay? Her counterpart voicing Windman, however, Shunsuke Sakuya, by comparison, doesn't have much of personal note outside of certain circles. At best, I know him from voicing two characters from stuff I've watched or been a fan of. Rin from Final Fantasy X, and Blackbeat from the Juko B-Fighter series that was adapted by Saban into Big Bad Beetleborgs. Now, he has done other stuff, but mostly he's known for doing the Japanese dub for Western movies and television shows. Regardless, Ran hears them out, learning of the overpowered ship, and decides to hold them until their operators arrive, meeting said group at the airport, and explaining the chip Higure stole actually contains the sealed data of a spiritual wind god of the island, which once more shows how bad an otaku Higure in this is. Because of superstition, and the island being the host of a weather control system, the island normally has network access to it heavily restricted, with that specific wind chip being one of the few means of getting to it, because if that system were to go down, the storms that would be generated would be catastrophic. Which is exactly why Yuriko is actually here, to throw a wrench into that. I mean, she plays a selfish goddess in another series. It would make sense she'd want to screw with another god. Then again, a selfish goddess at least does more than a useless goddess. She has Needleman pierce a barrier in the network's defenses, distracting Windman and the errant navis with a virus outbreak, which the operators help handle when they finally arrive. Only, as always, for Nebula to use the distraction to damage the control core for the control system in the chaos, the backup program to it transferring itself into a lion-dog statue, which Yuriko subsequently steals for Regal, But with the system offline, storms immediately start to form around the island. And worse, when Yuriko made her escape, Ran got hit straight in the face with the sacramental sake, causing single drink Ran to awaken. Yeah, totally see why this episode got skipped. Western media downplays any type of alcohol reference in shows that are getting directed or aired in slots for kids. I remember when 4Kids turned booze into literal hot sauce for an episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Admittedly, that kind of blended in with how insane Yu-Gi-Oh! GX could be early on, but it's still a legitimate example. Here, though, with Ran's inebriation issues getting representation front and center in the plot, yeah, there's no way they'd be able to write around it for a Western broadcast. Whereas Japanese ones had different censorship standards where they more care about graphic content as opposed to something someone would encounter in the mundanity of everyday life. So for them, this gets through without anyone batting an eye. Anyways, Yuriko and Needleman get to examining the control system and its power core, which is what they're really after. Regal needs to redesign the power matrix for his dimensional area converters to make them more effective, and the control system housed in the Shisaa statue is perfectly in line with what he's trying to make. But with the designs for such not public, it requires this operation to get them. Problem is, the system was designed to be copy-proof and write-protected, so Needleman's attempted analysis doesn't result in anything usable. And in fact, it backfires, the control core absorbing Needleman instead. And with storms already forming around the island and threatening the populace, it becomes a race against time to confront Yuriko before it's too late. Well, that was easy. But again, long jackets like that, they're going to catch heavy wind. But with Needleman assimilated into the core, well, they need to get him out of it before the system can be used to stop the storm. Though with him still accessing it, Needleman can direct some of its power to boost his own, which disrupts trying to get him out. The tide of battle only changing when Ran brings Windman on the server to disrupt and calm the wind control of the system, as Windman specifically created to prevent the system going nuts like this. But with Needleman tapping more and more of the core's power, even he's having a hard time, eventually resulting in him and Rockman harmonizing to overcome it, resulting in another unison. With Needleman shoved out of the core, Windman brings it back under control, and with the Guardian Lion Dog returned to its proper place, the storm around the island subsides, leaving the kids a chance to enjoy the beach before returning home. The wrap-up. We have I've Got Soul for the acquisition of Wind Soul, and the completion of the Red Sun-related Soul Unison chip library. We've got Wind Breaker! To Windman stopping a storm from brewing. We have Villain Faceplant, to Yuriko actually literally getting stepped on in this episode. And frankly, it's a bit overdue. Yuriko's been a consistent badass all series, and it's important sometimes to remind an audience that a character and their abilities are not infallible. Despite it never being broadcast or, to our knowledge, even imported, this one's a completely harmless filler episode, with some understandable reasons with regards to content on why it was skipped over. Or at least better ones than many of the others that got skipped in import before this had. Had Axess ever gotten proper DVD releases on our side of things, it should have been included, I would think, as what's proper for a home release and on broadcast have different standards to them. But as we didn't get any, it's hard to fault it that much on such. Past that, it's a pretty fair adaptation of Ran's story content from Battle Network 4, and thankfully her inclusion in things was not drawn out to a second episode, even if it does make the soul form acquisition be rather fast for how the animes approached such before. Considering soul unisons were created under even less harmonious circumstances in the games, however, well, that's certainly a detail that can just be mulliganed in this case. Yes, that actually is the title for this one, and it is another episode skipped in imports. As you'd expect, it revolves around malfunctions of the country's train line network by a mouse outbreak of viruses, which shuts down rail travel, or alternatively sending them rampaging throughout the rail network. Saloma and Woodman, however, are on the case to investigate these outbreaks, as they keep being caused by all electric-type viruses. Case in point on that, the malfunctions cause a freight train hauling tanks of oil and gas to release one of those cars from the coupling system, so it drifts on the track, up until the point a bullet train full of commuters runs straight right up to it. The train's operator manages to slow the train enough to prevent a derailing collision, so the tank is just stuck at the front of the train, but that could have been a disaster. Especially with Neto and Shisaa happening to be on that commuter trip.
これから面白いゲームが始まる。たっぷり戦慄と恐怖のゲームを楽しんでね。
So, I actually went and looked this up on whether a freight car connector and a bullet train's coupler would be compatible like this, and it turns out a grand majority of nations all use different styles and types of train car connectors. Thus, the short answer to this is yes, because both the car and the train are in Japan, so they would use the same type of coupler. But the long answer is technically no, because bullet trains are not meant to haul freight, so despite design similarities, they're not meant to be compatible, as they don't want someone foolish making the attempt to use a bullet train to haul very fast things that could be explosive.
列車の安全運行を管理するこの場所を狙う割には、送り込んだ相手がウイルスだけなんて。
確かに。これではただの愉快犯だ。
Nebula is behind this. When has anything been simple in dealing with them? It's at this point Sparkman takes direct control over that specific train and decides to play a game, challenging the official to try and stop him before the train reaches its final destination. Please, the only bit of trauma I have from those movies involves trucks hauling trailers of wood logs on the highway. Oh, come on, I cannot be the only one who saw those films and afterwards started to be paranoid about that. Still, this once more explains why this episode got skipped, as beyond a high-speed bomb not actually being possible on Japanese rail lines for reasons I said, in the mid-2000s, rail line bombs and derailments were a legitimate concern in the Americas due to a whole host of reasons. While train derailings are nearly unheard of in Japan, and they have only had 2 of any note in the last 100 years, they're a bit more frequent in the Americas. And 3 separate incidents had happened in close proximity to when this series was being imported. So it makes sense that the timing for dubbing and releasing such an episode would have been in very poor taste. Hell, of the 2 notable Japanese rail line incidents I could find record of, again, there could be others that I just could not find in my research, so future-proofing myself on that. One of them did happen in 2005, demolished a building, and killed over 100 people. But the other notable one before that hadn't been since 1963, so despite the presence of super-fast rail lines being ubiquitous in Japan, they really didn't seem to put together the means by which to make it their safest way to travel. Granted, the US has 5 times the amount of train rails laid in comparison to Japan, but a significant number of those have been abandoned in the last 3 decades. So that shows a significant difference in the safety records that just does speak for itself. But since Neto's on the train and a net saver at that, he can act directly inside the train to stop it, while on the outside, Saloma does her best to get ahead of the train to try and intercept and divert it, getting close enough so she can at least send Woodman into the train to help whoever might be inside. Saloma was always the best. It is a shame her side story in Blue Moon is completely fucking broken. Woodman trying to make his way to the front of the train, though, completely distracts Sparkman from Neto's own attempts to get to the front, creating an amusing paralleling story of the 2's respective battles. The dining car's cabin, why is this on a commuter train? Giving both of them issue due to the flames of the burners they're both weak to. At least until Rockman finally gets online, as there was a jack-in port in that car. Sparkman not expecting Rockman to be here makes him think he can get a bonus for this job, as by this point the train's destination has been determined, the Densan Terminal, which they'll reach within the next few minutes. Thus is invoked the race against time trope, with Neto literally fighting his way past the panicking passengers, only to find further progress physically blocked by fallen machinery. So while the Navis finally reach Sparkman, Neto alone has to find a way around outside the train.
Ow! The dust! It's like being shot in the eyes by a glitter gun!
Fortunately, Woodman manages to tank the majority of the damage with his electrical resistance, with the act triggering the resonance, enabling Rockman to gain... Before he reaches his end, however, Sparkman fuses the virtual controls and electrocutes the train conductor, meaning there's no way to undo what he's done. Except for Neto hitting the manual emergency brakes for the last-minute save for the second time with the train jacking in the series. Once more proving himself as not just an operator, but a big damn hero. The wrap-up. I've got Soul, the second to last Soul Unison form being acquired. We've got train jacking for the type of episode this is. We have designated tank, to Woodman proving impervious to nearly everything the enemy throws at them in this episode. And we have civilians are useless, to no one on the train car thinking to, try and stay calm as regardless of where they are, they're going to die anyways when the train hits due to the tanker explosion. As I've come to expect from good tales from Masaharu Amiya, this is a simple concept, the train jacking, executed well, and it's executed well by not overcomplicating itself. The situation is triggered, and we've got people that have to overcome the obstacles put in their way to stop it. Neto and Shisaa being on the train makes sense since they're coming back from the amusement park. It's merely by chance that train was the one chosen for this, while Saloma... I have no idea why she's back in town, considering she, Miyuki, and Mesa were forced into a "we're leaving forever now" bus by Mayuri Sekijima. Maybe this is just again Sekijima's problems as a writer coming back to spite him, but this time now, she's really gone after allowing Rockman and Neto to get Wood Soul sorted out. But this again shows a strong difference in execution, where Neto has to step up and overcome the odds to save people. While with the way Sekijima wrote Neto, he couldn't save a cat from a cardboard box. And as such, Neto is much better presented this way than the alternative. It's once more the tension and atmosphere of the crisis that sells this one, but with how many of the plots of the series are get to the place, jack in, overcome viruses and a boss to stop it, I can also get how many feel this was already overtread ground as well. That was why the anime showrunners introduced cross-fusion as a concept in the first place, after all. But when you go back to the classic method, well, if you've not broken it, then don't try to overdo it trying to fix it. Out in Sharo, a pair of miners find a dog out in the snow named Morozov. But that is the least of their problems. Besides, the thing from another world always strikes Antarctica first. Wait, right, I forgot about the Northman Nightmare comic. No, a ground of dimension area generators drop around the mine, the rare metal added being of interest to Nebula and its production of dark chips, showing once more that Nebula's interests are not limited to just the Japanese area. And because this is a problem involving Nebula, who should be called in to help but Neto Hikari? Unfortunately, this is a Mayuri Sekijima penned episode, meaning Neto is portrayed as an incompetent imbecile. And no, I will not get tired of bashing them for that, as it's an unnecessary and damaging exaggeration of character traits that is neither endearing nor assistive in resolving the plot of the week. This week, Sekijima is using the fact that Neto likes food to raid the free samples at a marketplace which depicts him as a glutton with no concept of self-control, which makes Neto have more in common with Homer Simpson than his canonical game counterparts. Again, acting like a protagonist hero is this completely hopeless at everything does not sell them as capable of dealing with the threats they're thrown into. It undermines that. You can have a character have flaws and failings they need to overcome, yes, but as I have said time and again, Sekijima's problem is he depicts characters as being nothing but their flaws just to get a cheap laugh, and it doesn't work. As, here's the joke in full. Neto devours all of Market's free food samples, only to be restrained by men in black. He thinks he's being arrested by security, but they're not police detectives. Why are they there? To hand him in person over to Rin, Yuriko, and Meijin, who are all suddenly there because they need to talk to him about saving Sharo from itself. But Neto's still stuck on being in trouble for raiding the food samples.
突然何を言い出すんだ。
それはこっちのセリフだよ。俺何がなんだかさっぱり。
Now, spot the joke. No, really, I'm waiting. Yeah, time's up. There isn't one. It's just meaningless, worthless filler when any of these people could have just called Neto on his PET and told him to fast-track it to the local airport so he can go deal with this Nebula attack in another country. And all done so Sekijima can deride the main characters as being too mentally slow to actually be the main hero. Like, if you're all tired of me saying the same thing on this matter, well, here's the key. I'm tired of having to say it, as legitimately every other writer on the show has made strides to improve things, while with every episode Sekijima's contributed, what makes their stories awful just stands out as insufferable more and more as we've seen evidence of how they depict the cast is no longer true of any of them, if it ever was. And again, it's not just Neto. Everyone here is stupid with how they react to all of this, and even why they're acting now. The rare metal mine, as it's literally referred to as, is said to be the source of 80% of the material they're mining. But unless it's something like Sakuradite, well, that's not really how we in the real world have found metal ore deposits to work. No one place has that high a concentration of any one thing. Hell, the reasons the writing staff have been unspecific about what rare metal this is outside of it just being a generic phlebotonium is simply to avoid any science conflicts about this stuff. Regardless, Neto and Rin meet with the Sharo military and Rika's boss, Morankov, which to show once more how the series hasn't handled Sharo the best, Morankov is more reasonable than Rika is. If you remember from Battle Network 4, the reason Rika was a jerk in his side story was because his boss was an even bigger asshole. Here, however, Sekijima, with his screw-ups, has now made it so that Rika has literally zero reason to have spent the series with a stick up his ass. Not in this setting, they're not. Prosthetics are always in high demand due to people being injured in dismembering accidents, to say nothing of birth defects, and I'd like to think replacement organs would be an even bigger issue. But if there is really that much of the stuff lying around spare that can go into something so ubiquitous as that, then you have immediately invoked a much larger plot hole. As if there's so much of it, then how was Yuriko having so much trouble getting more for synchro chip research to the point that there are still only 2 synchro chips in the hands of the Net Sabers despite how much time has passed? And in turn, why did Burnerman have to stage a heist to recover the few shards of it that were available in Japan, if either of them could just have cracked open a prosthetic arm and melted down the rare metal that limb would have contained according to this exposition drop? However, Rika is shown to have a personal conflict in all of this, as that dog from before, Morozov, it was trapped in the dimensional area, and for some reason, that dog is considered the hero of the nation, and the government is abandoning them. As Rika explains, Sharo as a country was previously very poor due to the harsh weather conditions it experiences. There are literally weather control systems in this setting, both the anime and the video games. One of them was featured 2 episodes ago. There is literally no reason for it to be. But that changed when Morozov by accident stumbled across the rare metal deposit. The rare metal deposit that is found in a mine that is situated deep below the permafrosted ground. Yeah, good luck trying to justify that to me. While dogs do go digging or into the ground, they're not exactly burrowing animals, and permafrosted ground is really, really hard. But as they arrive, they see the dimensional area fade and renew itself. And despite that not being a phenomenon they've ever seen, Rockman somehow knows all about it. This being due to the size of the dimensional area and how long it's been active, requiring the hologram generators need to periodically dump their data and renew the field. And that is never at any point seen again by the fields. And frankly, we've seen larger dimensional areas than this one form too. They could have rationalized it as the properties of the unrefined rare metal is messing with the consistency of the field, or the weather conditions are affecting the stability of the converters. But no, once more narrative contradiction about these things just because. Now, I'd say they've also invoked a plot hole with this as well, considering Rika and Searchman have previously disabled and destroyed dimensional converters with their cross-server sniper fire. But as you might recall, Kenichi Araki was very fast to patch that story conflict the first chance he had by correcting it to, no, Rika and Searchman doing that would and should not have ever worked. So them not even trying it here isn't an active conflict like some have stated it to be. What is, however, is Sekijima once more ignoring already established plot points. When Rika helps Neto get up to speed to dive into the dimensional area, he grabs onto Neto to use him as a means of entering the field himself, but in a way that is in complete contradiction to how cross-fusion is said to work. For the gear to form around its wearer, they have to be inside or in contact with the dimensional area, as the dimensional area allows the hard light hologram to be mapped onto the body of the wearer. No hologram generator, no suit. And moreover, what allows someone with enough force to use the cross-fusion transformation to pierce it is the transformation itself creates a barrier around the user that protects them from attacks or falling debris as the suit forms over them. That is why we see that visual explosion of light and energy. And that explosion of light and energy as a barrier is what allows the user to get through the outer shield of the dimensional area, as the two shields disrupt each other enough to let a single solid object in the middle of one to pass through the other. Thus, Rika grabbing onto Neto, yeah, no, he should have been blown straight off of him once Neto made contact with the barrier. But not even that. The episode shows the cross-fusion armor forming before Neto even makes contact with the outermost layers of the dimension area, where it logically cannot form. And as much as I'd like to blame the director for the visual discontinuity on this, as the animation director Taisuke Tsukushi has actually become a bit known for visual continuity errors like that, well, the writing around the event doesn't exactly present the reality that it was just a directorial miscommunication that was the issue. And moreover, that whole exchange was completely unnecessary. Sekijima already established that this dimensional area field is more unstable than the normal ones, meaning it's completely plausible for someone to walk through the perimeter of the field when the barrier fails. They introduced something that contradicts prior lore with circumstances that would make it plausible for someone unusual like that to happen, and then they don't do anything with it. And why would he even do that in the first place? Rika legitimately almost got both of them killed pulling a stunt like that, and threatened any goal they were trying to achieve. Considering Rika's a stickler for rules, regulations, and only respecting the authority and training of soldiers, Neto is damn right that Rika owes him an explanation. And the fact that Neto of all people, who Sekijima characterizes as an imbecile, is demanding one, really should be all you need to hear to realize how far off the deep end Rika's gone. All over a fucking dog. Now, as the episode eventually explains, Morozov is actually Rika's dog, and this was an attempt to finally soften on the character's awful portrayal all series. But as usual, it doesn't work because of how he's been presented here, flying off the handle for what is presented as the most superfluous of reasons. Especially since he knows Neto, and knows what to expect of him. Rika could simply have said, "Hey, can you help me with this?" And logically, Neto would have said, yes! Because that's the kind of guy Neto is when he's not being written as a selfish, imbecile, gluttonous idiot. This is once more what I mean when I say the failure to have consistency with the characters and only present their worst selves is an overall detriment. As instead of Neto having Rika finally come to be on good terms with one another by Neto helping Rika with a personal problem that's interfering with his capacity to do his job that gives them an angle to properly open up and Rika loosen up a little, having a personal issue just instead winds him tighter to the point of incredulity and his conduct an active danger to everyone, including his goals. And to add to the dumb of this episode, that entire scene I just talked over, why is Neto not in his cross-fuse state? He knows there's enemies around. He didn't need to reload his battleship deck into his PET, and the gear protects him far better from the cold than just his normal clothes. as suddenly, despite wearing a jacket in the prior part of the scene, now he's completely without it despite cross-fusion not destroying their clothing. I will credit his jacket being gone to an animation error, but the episode has written Neto as having crossed out after entering the field. So there's no mulligan on that because they should have been drawing him as still fused up the entire time. So not only do you have a character contradiction plot hole from this, it's a narrative plot hole that then causes subsequent visual plot holes. As why this happens is so Neto and Rika can be attacked by excavation machines infested by Nebula viruses. Will also be attacked by viruses in the real world. But by Neto sending Rockman in to fight the cyberspace ones, it then leaves them vulnerable to the real-world ones. When once more, Rika should be the one dealing with the cyberspace ones as he can't cross-fuse, while Neto's the only one that can deal with the realized ones from the Darkloid mid-boss. And if Neto were cross-fused, then he'd just be able to shrug off any hits from those machinery. As while he's fused up, he's been shown as strong enough to literally lift those things or disable them via other physical means. It's the entire reverse of what this should be, and for no single explicable reason. And this reads even worse in comparison to what happened last episode, where all the tension and drama came from just a mundane hijacking where nothing with dimensional areas happened. That episode was better simply for the reason that there was no easy way out of the situation. For as I've explained before, an indie plot occurs when the heroes of a story deliberately do not use the fastest, simplest method to resolving a situation for no justifiable reason given. Just because the story says so, and the only internal valid reason given is that everyone involved is an idiot and didn't think to do anything else. So of course, all this does is threaten their lives to unnecessarily pad out the episode. Cold men watching their exploits without even needing to do anything to them. They're just going about killing themselves, simply because Rika thinks he knows better as he grew up playing in the mines? Oh look, there's even more major contradictions here. Marikov is Rika's dog. Marikov found the rare metal that's being mined here as some new major asset to the economy of the country. But Rika's in his late teens, early 20s at most. Even if Marikov ended up finding the metal as a puppy and in a pre-existing mine, which logically means the mine was pre-existing and it's really dumb to think the country didn't know of the metal being there from their own surveys, then logically Rika's dog is well past the point where he should have died. Also, yeah, they later say the mine was dug out after the discovery and wasn't a pre-existing excavation, so no, Rika could not have played here as a kid. As for its size, it needed to have first started as a development a decade ago to be as big as they show. Now, the Rockman.Exe secret official setting illustration guide infers that Rika actually might be 13, despite being in the military, and the immense discrepancy between his apparent age and everyone else's. Remember, by the time they meet him, the Hikari brothers are supposed to be 12 or 13 themselves, yet by comparison Rika looks like a full adult. But that's long been believed to be a mistranslation, confusing his game counterpart being part of the 13th Division of Sharo's army's Net Division. And the difficulty in believing Rika's actually younger in this case comes from the fact that mining operations like this, industrial support and significant economic recovery, are not things that happen overnight. Thus, the farther out from the event of the metal's discovery, the better a detail that actually is. If this was like in the last couple of years, and the reason Rika's in the military is because of his service to the country, then that's really not the good sign they're trying to take it as, and presents the idea that there is a hell of a lot more fundamentally wrong with this world than just the machinations of the bad guys and some people being selfish jerks.
ゴールドマンと戦うんじゃないのか?
それはお前の任務だ。俺には関係ない。
Except your self-given mission would go a lot smoother if the viruses and Darkloids were manifesting in the real world, dude. It hurts your chances at success if they can harm who you're looking for. And it's been a while since I've had this much material to rant about on an individual episode. And I think I've been trying to keep these episodes short for a reason. Rika finally gives up that this whole thing is him wanting to save his dog, but frankly after all this, it's too little too late on the matter due to how the two have been drug around and this whole thing padded out. Eventually they manage to find the dog in the mine's break room, Rika giving the most flimsy of excuses on why they didn't just tell him directly and ask for help. Especially then has to fight Coldman directly to save them anyways. ultimately results in Coldman's defeat, as by scaring him back into the net,
この時を待っていたぞ
Searchman snipes him center mass. Though Coldman's thick siding protects him enough so he'll live for another day. The dimensional area, however, drops, leaving the rest free to leave, and Neto speaks on Rika's behalf to get him out of trouble before heading back home. At least once the blizzard that's about to hit clears, as Neto is not present in the next episode for a reason. The wrap-up. We have plot-designated idiot, to how Mayuri Sekijima writes characters. We have idiot plot, to several events of this episode reading no other way. We have contradictory contrivances, for how things in this episode read opposite of presented lore for no reason. We have it'll be a cold day in hell, for someone evil being ice-themed. And we have their evil is measured in dead puppies, to Coldman kicking Morozov being what sets off the circumstances for him to be curb-stomped. This episode... For everything it wants to do right, it does another two things wrong. Finally bonding with Rika? Good. Him endangering themselves and others? Bad. Neto calling out the harmful antics of someone else? Good. Him being presented as a moron and enabling that crisis? Bad. The adults around them being poignant about the need to deal with this situation quickly? Good. Not doing everything to get this done as fast as possible and with the lowest casualties capable? Bad. This one needed a lot more revision on it to get it to the functional story it needed to be. And as it is, it just doesn't work. But at the very least for a Sekijima episode, there is some progress made. For next time Rika shows up, he's much less of a jerk. Wait, how did Airman get on this rankings list? And who the hell is Hyde AJ? While Neto is off in Sharo assisting Rika, this episode occurs, with us seeing one of the Navis that previously participated in the N1 Grand Prix in Season 1, Shining Man, being abducted. This follows with others having the same occur, Whale Man being abducted from his job at the aquarium, and Roll being accosted while helping Mail looking up world history information at a library, while Mail herself was busy talking to Enzan, who'd she'd bumped into. It's only by chance she wasn't taken, but with her being a witness, it gives Mail an in to being part of Enzan's subsequent investigation into this to find the perpetrator. They talk to Meijin, who confirms similar incidents have been happening recently every few days, which they've recorded, but have had trouble tracking since the public Net City-based incidents are running aground to the fact that the Net City recovery project's only gotten the region 70% restored. The fact that Navi processing data is used as the central core of dimensional area converters makes it a possibility that this might be Nebula harvesting new cores for the converters, but it's too soon to be certain. Especially since their antics are usually not covert like this, but use misdirection tactics to draw attention away from what they're after. However, collecting a list of the Taken has them all connect the dots to the notable fighters of the N1 Grand Prix, meaning it's less likely to do with Nebula, and more something relating to that whole series of events. However, there is a commonality. All of the operators and Navis seem to cross paths at a certain arcade, which the Navi that was taken in front of Roll was at as well. The two Getarobo-referenced Navis that were also competitors are the next to be abducted, the giant crane from the sky being more and more ubiquitous with time, and again, the game center being a point of commonality. The one behind it, however, is monitoring them, and it wanting to steal Blues, and unaware that Blues is currently a Darkloid, makes it try to attack and draw them out, to no luck in this case. So Enzan and Mail's investigation leads them to the game center, and a game that all the stolen Navis had played. And with Blues as said MIA, it's up to Mail and Roll to step up. The freaking life virus? Like, yeah, Anime Roll is strong. Even Enzan can see that as he's not interfered with this at all to take over for Mail before this point. But damn, this is like Mail Marathon completing Battle Network 1 with an alt character. But yeah, when Roll finally oversteps and nears defeat, Well, the battleship gate can transmit chips to cyberspace as well. Thus, Enzon opens a black hole to suck the super virus in to trigger a clear situation. With this done, though, well, now Roll's a target, and properly prepared, they've got her installed with a tracking program so they'll be able to trace where they've been taken. Unfortunately for Roll, that'll take time, and Roll without her operator finds herself in a Navi gladiatorial arena, where the Navis are forced to fight under threat of deletion. Oh, just declare you're Spartacus or Henchman number 1 or something. It'll draw the big bad out pretty fast. Actually, Roll just triggers the tracking beacon, which shows her inside a research installation. But in the meantime, she's forced to fight against a Navi that just doesn't want to listen.
Flame Tower!
All for the enjoyment of their host.
面白くなってきたぜ。
This is why you never fight above a magma pit, people.
Noise storm! Yoya! 今楽にしてやる。バトルチップ、ゼウスハンマー!
Fortunately, Maylu does make it here just in time. Enzon confronting the mastermind, a childish robot? Oh, come on, does everyone but the good guys have this technology now? So, funny story about this character, named Allegro, is voiced by Junko Minagawa. While she would eventually be allowed to move into playing more mature character roles in the form of Haruka Tano in Sailor Moon Crystal, and Cornelia Lee Britannia in Code Geass, at the time she was most known for voicing young boy characters, starting her VA career rather strongly as Ryoma Enshinsen in the 2001 adaptation of Prince of Tennis, as well as providing the voice of Hakuo in Duel Masters, and Shugo Kinosaki in the awful Legend of the Twilight Bracelet anime adaptation. Her personal voice actor story is actually interesting as well, but where I'm going with this? Well, when this episode aired, she was yet another high-profile voice talent Xebec had managed to secure for a cameo here, to show they were using their assets appropriately. Most of the VAs for the Rogues Gallery hadn't quite built up their myriad of memorable roles yet, or weren't actively voicing many others alongside this. But this stuck out to me, as the character of this robot is a one-off appearance, an original character to the series, and part of a kind of important subplot.
Boomerang! Slot in! しまった！ランダム！エレキブレード！アレグロ。
And that subplot is Forte, or rather, the sudden return of Forte, who Allegro has done all of this for. As Forte's younger brother AI, that Forte created as a companion to accompany him in his travels while using the Gospel drone robot's body. While it developed the ability to create dimensional area generators, its juvenile mindset was a hindrance to what Forte had in mind, so he just pulls out Allegro's brain and destroys it? Harsh way of reprimanding a misbehaving child, dude. The wrap-up. We have I'm Not Dead! For the series reminding us that Forte is a thing. We have a mystery plot, with Enzon and Maylu getting to the bottom of a bunch of Navi disappearances that goes nowhere. As I've said elsewhere, Kenichi Araki clearly had some sort of plan for Forte that wasn't able to be capitalized on in the anime, as whatever the stuff here was ultimately leading to never ended up materializing. In context of chronological viewing of the series, this was a big moment for us watching as it aired, with everyone who first watched it wondering what Forte was planning and had coming, how he might use dimensional area tech to his own advantage, and then, well, nothing really came of it, which honestly makes this episode a bit worse in retrospect. Still, there's some strong stuff with Enzon and Maylu pairing up for an adventure, and what could have been had the early side of the show not stupidly enforced the "I've got to keep the Nutsaver job secret" mess, which that then became. As here, it's very clear Kenichi Araki has a soft spot for Mayl as a character, with how she helps take point as opposed to any of the group's other available allies. Hell, one of the former World 3 agents, for example, could have been brought in for another cameo, since they could have initially seemed to be targets. But Mayl being the one to do it shows just what Araki might have been planning out for the next season, considering what eventually happens there. Sadly though, because nothing truly comes of this one, them resolving this with a cliffhanger, "I'll be back" moment doesn't really feel like a proper conclusion, making it a surprisingly skippable episode in the grand scheme. But still, it was one that actually was important, so it's not like I have that much room to complain.
ちょっと何考えてるのよ。ネットにとって何なの？ただの便利屋。
Soon, soon! Ladies, gentlemen, and others, it is time! Mayl has a dream of Neto being in trouble, specifically facing down the might of Swordman, only for her to come in as the big damn hero.
シンクロチップスロットイン。クロスフュージョン。
Now, if this is a dream, then why did I show as much of the sequence as Content ID would allow me? Because it's not the only time you end up seeing it. Really, the dream is about Mayl wanting Neto to notice her more as a partner and romance interest, as, well, she's the only one of their friends around, they've been friends since preschool, and she's at the age where she's starting to notice boys since girls develop along those trains of thought faster. And when she tells parts of her dream to Neto, well, he doesn't see why she can't achieve anything that's her goal if she's adamant about reaching it. Unfortunately, Neto's called off to deal with a Nebula incident, so she's stuck with his cleaning duties and having to lie to Mariko about it. Once again, since I feel like I need to repeat this, as the show applies it so inconsistently depending on the writer, Neto keeping his duties a secret was his idea to keep his friends out of the firing line, considering he has to show his credentials constantly to other people in other positions to get into areas where only official agents can go, which makes for a very lousy secret identity if it has to be kept from everyone not already in the know. The way the other writers that aren't Kenichi Araki insist on using it never stops being stupid as a result. And this all once more preys on Mayl's underlying wish that she could help more than just covering for him in mundane stuff. Especially with how Neto, when the good writers are here writing on the show at least, is taking his job seriously, and she feels she needs to step up as well. This makes her flash back to when they were even younger, and little baby Neto protected her from schoolyard bullies.
私がいなきゃ何もできなかったのに、今じゃしてあげられることって言ったら、掃除変わってあげるくらいで。ほらほら、ネットも書いて。私とネットがずーっと仲良しでいられますようにって。どんどん変わっていっちゃうみたいで。ちょっと寂しいな。
Let's face it, every competent writer on this franchise was unsubtly shipping the two. Even better that it ended up canon in the end. However, her support has not gone unnoticed. On top of Neto being eternally grateful, he actually asks her out the next day to show his gratitude. Hilarity! In tsundere shenanigans. Soon-nanigans? Ensues. As what happens here is, well, Neto, and thankfully the sub makers also caught the context to this joke, accidentally used language that implies that Neto was asking Mayl on a date. Roll reinforces this belief.
デート？だってしたくないの？ネト君とデート。したいとかしたくないとかじゃなくて、だってまだ心の準備が。 なんでいきなりネットのバカ!
And she dresses accordingly in the cutest thing she has, thinking that is the case. Which does actually catch Neto's attention. However, all Neto wanted to do was take her to Scilab, having asked Yuichiro to test her to see if her sync rate with Roll was high enough to potentially perform cross-fusion, which wasn't at all what she really wanted, but still is in the vein of it considering that dream she had. And in this case, Neto did get what she really wants, a way to help out more than she does, and he does want to help her achieve her dreams. Thus, with her explaining only part of her dream and him only having context to what she explained, well, with just what he was told, he wanted to help her see if it was possible. And it is! Male and Roll synchro rate is higher than Goro's with Prisman's, but they're just not quite there yet. I'd give it, say, a little over half a year. But that's where tsundere ensues, as this was nothing like what she was expecting. And it isn't Neto's fault. She made an assumption, and the assumption was wrong. Though there is a bit of a bait and switch here, as Yuichiro caught what Male thought this was, and saved Neto from disaster as he has on him 2 passes to the local amusement park just for them.
行くわよ、ネット。
行くって、どこへ？
デートよ、デート!
Soon! But before they can really get to enjoying themselves, well, Swordman chooses now of all times to attack them, interrupting any chance for them to have a moment, and striking so fast that, with Male there, Neto is struck before he can transform, and the synchro chip is sent flying. She manages to rescue the chip while Swordman's distracted, tearing her dress in the process, but ends up drawing attention to herself in doing so, which splits them even farther apart. With seemingly no other options, and with Swordman stalking her, well, no harm in trying. Yeah, suffice it to say, there were a lot of fans on both sides of the Pacific that were a bit pissed about this, considering the propensity in Henshin hero media for women and young girl members of the casts to be screwed over unless it is explicitly a magical girl hero series, though that has been better in recent days. This ends up being majorly remedied by Stream when a team of cross-fusion wielders is ultimately built with near half the team being girls, but it's long been a persistent rumor that sects of Stream were done in response to negative reception to parts of Axess, this being one of them. Now, the way I would have tried to resolve it and do minor rewrites of this one is, it works for her, but she's only just on the threshold of it working so the gear can't stay stable on her, and thus only managing to get her briefly out of danger before failing. Which would work as proof that if she keeps trying, then she will be able to achieve the things that matter, but then allowing the rest of the episode to play out upon the arc it's built that Male needed reassurance that Neto's always going to be there for her. And not just the reverse, as that flashback and then Neto's immediate actions protecting her from Swordman are paralleling. But there's nothing wrong either with wanting to step up and walk hand in hand into battle with one you care for, so they'll mutually have each other's backs. And I think that's something missing from a lot of media that has combat as a significant part of it. It's rare to see an actual battle couple see showcase. It's either the significant other holds down the home, the tuxedo mask effect where they just show up all but briefly, the lovers, if they're even acknowledged as such, are separated, or they inevitably get left behind when the actual major battles happen. There has been so much reinvention of the cultural zeitgeist over the last 20 years on a lot of these matters. People playing up varied angles on fads and themes like this in their stories. But the layout always falls into those camps when it comes to 2 characters that are inevitably going to be lovers and their roles in combat. I'd actually like to see a battle couple, beginning to end, fight together throughout all of their story. Code Geass got close, but didn't go all the way thanks to the show screwing over Callan and its subsequent Zero Requiem arc kicked off. Gundam Build Divers kind of did it as a team thing, And technically Symphogear did it, but the paramour in that really isn't a battle couple, unless you count Kirika and Shirabe as a tertiary character pairing. I could go on with examples that kind of enter the range of what I'm talking about, but don't end up going all the way into achieving it. I don't know, it just got on my mind with this one, and really the only thing that gets the closest these days is what happened to the Xenoblade Chronicles games, specifically 2 and 3. Still, Maylu tosses the chip to Neto, allowing him to suit up and finish the job they started, unfortunately wrecking the playground where their mark had been drawn, but destroying one of Swordman's 3 heads in the process. But Neto gets his big damn hero moment by catching her before it's too late, and the dimensional area fails. All in all, there's worse ways for a first date to go. The wrap-up. We have foreshadowing to Maylu eventually getting the ability to cross-fuse. No joke, when she eventually gets the ability, they literally use the animation for her suit-up they created here. To the point it is a recurring animation error throughout stream that she's shown using the advanced model PT to do it, even when she ends up getting the Battle Network 5 style progress model. We have, yes, Lan, dense as a bag of hammers, Hikari, it's a date. To both this situation and me referencing that line again from my review of Battle Network 4. I really wish Greg Sepelak had written his version of the line as such in Battle Network 4's guidebook. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, please watch my Battle Network game reviews. We have Tsundere Explosion, to Maylu being the most soon she's been in a while, particularly in a spotlight episode of her own after the last one where she also had heavy focus. We have Anime Glasses. For Yurichiro Hikari during his short part in the episode, having his glass lenses flare like Gendo Ikari's does in Evangelion after sticking his future redheaded daughter-in-law in a simulation plug suit. We all know what is being referenced here. Once more a strong outing for the show, alluding to things with kids that are just in that age to start thinking about those things, and mostly an appropriately done one, even though by the time the date actually gets going, it's pretty deep into the episode. Meaning you're almost expecting it to get interrupted before it actually goes anywhere. Meaning the game made it so they had a more successful date by proxy. One of the few merits of Battle Network 4. Too bad that entry is just a large mess of frustration. And even with me normally being endeared to non-abusive tsundere characters, this one I think presents how such a character should be portrayed as well. They're frustrated for something outside of their control and insecure about their own feelings. The cause is someone who is being reasonable and helpful, but because they get the wrong impression due to no one's fault, things go sideways. Bad writers who use tsunderes don't know where the lines are when they cross them. Thus they are portrayed more aggressive and hurtful, which reaches outside the limits of what can be considered proportionate response. And proportionate response is key to a good tsundere character. If they're angry and aggressive for no reason, or for the most inane of slights where there's no chain to it, it's just abuse by a bitch. And a lot of writers prefer to do that because it was either easier or said tsundere was a creator's pet. Noted author Rumiko Takahashi is especially guilty of this as she basically popularized the abusive bitch interpretation of a tsundere. It is consequently forgotten that it's supposed to be a character trait, part of a person. Not that the person is not, but that trait. Tiny distinction, but big difference when put into play. And the writers, for the moment, knowing when to dial it back or dial her up in turn, is what can keep episodes like this, where she's full blast, from coming off as awful. As I have seen other writers do this exact kind of plot wrong. Masaharu Emiya brings us this one, which for some reason opens on a very brief recap of the series. Yeah, I don't know why either. To fill time in an episode that ran short is all I've got, cause this fills up a lot of time. And all it does is segue us into Rockman fighting a bunch of Navis based on, as the translator note says, old people stuff. Okay, yeah, this episode is taking direct inspiration from the Top Man side story from Battle Network 4. If you'll remember from that, we had to get a bunch of old people who made their own Navis to be closer with their grandkids to help fix another that was made the same way. In the game, they were all depicted as normal Navis, the generic grunt Navi look. Obviously, while mass production Navis exist in the anime setting as well, that wasn't going to fly for a social club of old people who were focused around learning Navi's customization for the aforementioned goal. This is part of a training lecture the two are doing as part of that plot to said club for those who want to learn and build that connection. Still, Neto's lecture and demonstration isn't on the up and up with older style netbattlers, such as the top master himself, Tensuke. As I've discussed before, because the Net Society's timeline has been pushed significantly farther back than it was in its game version of events, these old people actually did live at a point in time where Net Navis were first becoming commonplace, and the difference between the then and the now is simply the introduction of utility programs that are stored and installed via the use of battle chips. Thus, while the episode is still about the same type of storyline of the cultural divide between the young and the old, it draws its basis upon differing factors of it, about some old people not wanting to accept change and new assets that can improve the ways older things are done. This shown with how Top Man basically has all the abilities of a solo net Navi, but improved with support of an operator. This old man would be unstoppable if this were Beyblade. I cannot actually believe that Beyblade as a franchise is still running with new anime incarnations. Can any of you believe that? Whereas Rockman is heavily reliant on dodging and then counterattacking, but his most successful counterattacks only come with support of the battle chips. Kind of a criticism of the game is layered on that as well, when you think about it, considering it's impossible to do well against, anything in the games without collecting the chips and assembling the right folders of support, which can be a bit of an uphill climb and time sink. There is a reason the players of the games do not take issue with those that cheat the library. Tensuke does not take his loss well, blaming his failings on other factors instead of owning up to the possibility that he was wrong, and not wanting to accept changes not made by himself. Oh joy, we have old man Suzaku Kururugi in the house. How fun! This is exemplified by how he wanted to change up net battles, and that being with top duels. That's your question, Mail? I mean, it is a legitimate one, but it's been forever since they have had a fourth wall break or acted in character as the ones that are supposed to be the deadpan snarker reactionaries, acting as the straight men to the insanity around them, as was the original characterization of them. Tensuke throws out his back in the excitement, which ironically makes Neto stress his carrying the man home from the rec center, which all ends up being a prank at his expense. When there, Tensuke invites them in and shows off his talents as a craftsman, and how long he can make his top spin. He apparently designed one that can spin forever. In his dreams. I'm only half joking with that Inception reference. His magnum opus is one he's still working on that is designed to be able to spin forever using a conservation of mechanical energy, which is insane if you actually think about it. Or at least when you think of it in the right terms. An example being how electricity is created. See, it's created through charge polarization. Using a magnet, you spin the magnet, which causes electrons in a wire wrapped around it to then move. When enough electrons move, you get a charged current of electricity. Mechanical energy, the spinning of the magnet, is turned into potential electrical energy. So what then happens when a top maker creates a top that spins on its own forever? you have an object that could potentially generate unlimited potential mechanical energy that, if hooked up correctly, can turn into unlimited potential electrical energy. That is insane, and why in a lot of media, it is actually a rule of cool factor to see the power core of something begin to spin at higher and higher speeds as it provides more energy and thus becomes stronger. So why did he stop the invention of this marvelous feat of engineering? Why, to learn how to net battle like the young ones do. Simply to connect with his grandson Kosuke, who wanted to play with him. Hearing this, Neto and Maylu offer to help this scrub get good, but only if they can wrangle him properly.
かわいそう康介くん。約束破ったら悲しむだろうな。
Maylu is absolutely savage when she wants to be. Thus the training begins, but as amateur tutors, I think they're a bit ahead of where their pupils need to be, as part of said training involves listing off chip combos that go into discovered program advances, when they more need to start them on how to chain chip combos, which can be just as, if not more effective. Well, that and the importance of area steal as the greatest battle chip ever, best used in combination with the best program advance ever. But really, a lot of this episode is the repackaging of gameplay elements around the battle chip system. And unfortunately, it's all Greek to him, which points out something I've been addressing with how poorly some of the writers have treated Neto. In that it is very difficult to learn when you are placed in an environment that does not encourage learning, or is led by an individual who is not good at creating engagement with the material being taught. It's not always on the individual who isn't learning, especially if they truly want to learn. But some factor prevents it, or they're discouraged from wanting to. If Neto really is as stupid as some of the writers write him as, or he's completely incapable of doing his schoolwork despite the growth as a character we've seen from him, and how smart he can be in situations, then what does that say about those around him who are responsible for the environment he learns in, if he can so easily excel at other things? This kind of thought is why I go off on the idiot protagonist thing so often, as writers who like to make use of it really don't think about these things and why characters would act the way they do. If they have all the right assets around them to be smart and are still an idiot, or was in situations where they would have learned to make the right decision and still make the wrong ones, then there's only so long that can go on before something has to give. Refusing to do so, or compensating for that by bringing down the intelligence of the rest of the cast by slaving them to that, then breaks a story. Here, though, that isn't a problem. Tensuke's malaise towards learning comes from his own hurdles of being an old man, and being too stubborn to open himself up, alongside the kids, and also Higure, who briefly gets roped into this, just throwing too much at him at once. An example, for the Yu-Gi-Oh fans in my audience, just try throwing a new player or an old one who dropped out over a decade ago into not just playing archetypes, but fusion, synchro, exceed, pendulum, and link summoning mechanics all at once. Like, I know adults that love the game and used to play, but stopped because they skipped a Master Rule format change and then lost all sight of how to play with the newer stuff introduced. Hell, when we used to do the dual streams on this channel, a lot of them tended to stop by. Which is ironic considering how much that game survives these days on solely legacy support tailored to those players, and not actually introducing new functional mechanics that no one really wants to use, or is otherwise being screwed over by the power creep. But that's Tensuke's hang-up. He doesn't truly want to do it, but Kosuke is important to him. So when he shows his grandson his perpetual motion tops, and they go crazy because they got infected with stray viruses, somehow the episode makes this Higure's fault, and I don't see why that was necessary. Top Man finally has to step up and battle viruses before his errant creation actually hurts someone. Ah, the anti-spiral is upon us. And thus has to put everything he actually learned up to task. With that, Rockman can then cover the rest in shutting down the errant creation. Thus, the old man gets to learn the merit of something new, and gets to properly bond with his grandson over what he himself can now pass on. And thankfully, there is no top soul anywhere in sight. The wrap-up. we have Top Men for Tensuke and Top Man. We have Old Man Yells at Cloud, once again to Tensuke and his conduct towards others. Once more from a story by Masaru Amiya, this is basically filler, as we're nearing the season working to wrap itself up, and thus we needed a bit more Battle Network 4 adaptation fodder to add to that. And there's nothing really wrong with it. Everyone's fully in character, things going nuts in a more exaggerated way fits well, I've got no real complaints. Even Tensuke manages to be a bit more endearing here than his game incarnation by the better expression of the old man mannerisms, held by the entire class of old people who were more engaged than him in learning the tools of the trade early on, which he contrasts against. And once more, instead of punishing or insulting a character, all you really need is a good contrasting characters to have a good, harmless, fluffy comedy plot. Okay, that title cannot be right. Kids should never fear summer break. Unless for some reason you're given summer homework and forget to do it. This is again a case where I need to remind everyone that the series works under, well, a sliding timescale, as everything from the beginning of the anime to its end at Beast Plus is supposed to occur over the course of 2 to 3 years, especially since this is once more again filler padding out progression of the Nebula arc. And really, it's been quite some time since we've seen Nebula involved beyond sending out minions to harass other antagonists. Kind of bleeds out how we were previously on a much stricter arc. But yeah, as Neto's been so busy fighting Nebula and the Dark Lloyds, well, summer's just vanished. So he's trying to get as much as he can in, encouraged by the messages Dekao and Yaito have sent showcasing their own achievements. And what does Neto have to show for his time? Just the world keeping on turning. Yeah, like that's worth anything. Actually, him trying to catch beetles, again a Battle Network 4 reference, is meant to be part of an extra credit project Mariko assigned him that he actually wants to do. Again, please see my tangent on educators needing to keep students engaged if they want them to learn. But in comparison to what Dekao and Yaito are up to, it is small potatoes. Thus why Maylu actually suggests an alternative. Something they can do together. Elsewhere though, Cold Man and Sword Man, down to 2 swords if you'll remember, come across a building set out separate in a cyberspace desert, desiring to awaken from within it the AI sleeping inside. Oh hey, Mistman. Yeah, the 2 are after him, as a solo Navi joining the Dark Lloyds would help replenish their very depleted ranks. But Mistman wants nothing to do with it, for despite being a solo Navi, he's fervently faithful to the wishes of his original operator. Appropriate considering he's based on a genie, or a djinn, whichever. Both Dark Lloyds try attacking him to get him to join. Yeah, that's a terrible recruitment tactic. Only for Mistman to curb stomp both of them, though consequently this giving a hint that if they want to talk for real, they have to find where his data is stored in the real world. So, does anyone know a good lamp reviewer? Meanwhile, as a visual sight gag, Neto's failures at bug hunting somehow take him and Maylu around the world, through the Upside Down, and into the space between spaces unknown. Why do I get the feeling that this is going to end with him catching a xenomorph that calls herself Pinky? This is how I know that this is meant to not be taken that seriously though, as these are clearly just part of a big sight gag exaggerating the lengths Neto's trying to go to for this project, with only really his stubbornness preventing them from doing anything better. And, wait, where the hell are they now? Is Neto Hikari somehow related to the Hibiki clan? How did this even escalate that far? Though, as a reminder, Japan does have deserts on its landmass, so this could still be in Japan. It's unlikely it's Japan, but it is possible. A sandstorm, however, abruptly starts, forcing them to look for cover, in a building that looks just like the one from the cyberworld that Mistman was guarding. While they get inside, the door seals shut behind them. Maylu panicking, until they see a giant diamond pushed by a gold bug, which leads them deeper into the palace.
ラクダの像だよ。なんでこんなところに。あれって宝石じゃない？
Yeah, you can guess the way this is going to go. Neto logically applies Occam's razor to this, figuring the place must have some robotic sentries disguised among the statues, meaning there must be something to guard inside, making Maylu curious to what's here against her normal character. And they're not the only ones being screwed with. Yuriko's also made her own way here, and falls into the same traps. Though this amuses me, as this is the second time in a row where she's been part of things, and made to fall into the pratfalls of a normal character, instead of being the complete mysterious badass. I'm not surprised to see it, though. This one comes to us thanks to Katsuhiko Chiba, who pretty much did the same thing to Aisha on Outlaw Star. It doesn't make the character less competent, just flailing like anyone would when shoved harshly outside of their expected comfort zone. A supernatural comedy horror plot like this? That works for throwing off an expected dynamic. What they come to realize, though, is this place really is technologically wired, meaning this is either someplace part of a super ancient civilization, or this place has been retrofit into modernness. Rock and Roll logging in gets them confronted by Mistman, who thinks they're Dark Lloyd backup, but is polite enough to request they leave first. But unfortunately, Mistman's not exactly up to just giving the instructions to leave. Thus, they end up needing to make use of the same goal Yuriko's after. Find Mistman's magic lamp to gain his assistance. I mean, this is an example where they could all just give up the case as a lost cause, and Yuriko could give her mortal enemy, for the moment, a lift back to civilization. No need to escalate things when they're having an off day, after all. Wait a few weeks. I think you'll want to reconsider that. Ultimately, they reach the treasure room, but don't know which thing will lead them to contracting with Mistman, until the point Yuriko just says screw it and fires down a set of dimensional converters. At the same time, Maylu reaches the lamp. And thus, by grabbing his vessel, Mistman agrees to help them fight off the Dark Lloyd assault. Unfortunately, whoever holds the lamp is the master. Thus, because Yuriko can take advantage of children's one weakness, that being short arms, she snags it from her, resulting in the back and forth you'd expect in such chaos. The worst part of this, though, is, while this entire exchange actually is funny, it is undermined by a lot of what was animated for this being used in a full loop. Seriously, the same bits in the whole fight are used like 3 or 4 times, and it gets old fast. Ultimately, Maylu ends up getting Yuriko to fall into another floor trap, giving her exclusive control over the lamp, and from it, the Genie Navi and cross-fused Navi delete both enemy Dark Lloyds. However, their feud has actually lifted his curse to subservience to his former master, allowing Mistman to go and live freely for the rest of his days. In his gratitude, guiding the kids home, and back to bug hunting. As for Miss Yuriko... Nope! I am noping right out of this one. The wrap-up. We have Playing Against Type for responsible student Neto Hikari. We have Designated Screamer to Rockman, Maylu, and Yuriko on this one. We have Genie Problems to Mistman and the Servitude part of that power set. And we have Unexpected Cameo by Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees of all characters. Yeah, the show riffed on popular movies in 2004 earlier in the season, but what is the actual hell on this one? Not much else to say. This is another harmless comedy plot padding out getting to the real end of the series, with the only real status quo shift being Coldman and Swordman being taken out of the picture. With retrospective look at all these episodes, it more seems like the ones that were cut from broadcast were all filler or had reasonable justifications for why they were skipped over, and this one wasn't, despite it also not doing anything to advance much, simply due to their deletions. The only Darkloids that didn't have their deletions be seen by the US audience were Burnerman, because US broadcasters skipped that one, and Sparkman because airing the train jacking plot would have been in poor taste with close proximity to a actual train crash. And that again shows, despite the season's heavily delayed airing, that more care was actually taken in regards to Axess's import and broadcast. A pity then that after the mess the first season is considered to be in the West, that there weren't many takers towards continuance on. Despite that though, we still have one more filler episode to go before the endgame of the season can properly start. And it's also the last one that got skipped in broadcast. See you there. Today, Rush the Net Dog has a personal problem, taking the form of male cat sitting for a friend's kitten. And despite being an AI dog that only manifests itself in reality, well, Rush takes offense to that kitty being there. Not helped by, well, the kitten being a brat, and being blamed for their misbehavior, which wrecks Male's home. Though surprisingly, they honestly can't tell which is the cat's and which is Rush's exploits. Not helped by Rush usually splitting his antics between both Male and Neto's homes, as well as online. Maybe they should consider taking him to an animal training course. Pair him with a bunch of spikies. Regardless, to try teaching Rush to behave, Neto and Male joke about keeping the kitten, which makes Rush feel betrayed, and subsequently run away from home. The episode is then the misadventures of the unlucky Rush out in the world, and getting screwed over by life, and a rabid pit bull, for a long stretch of the episode. It's not awful, but you can only get by the same gag for so long, especially since Rush can just transition himself into the cyber world anytime he has an issue. Thus there's no need for him to really have misadventures in the real world like this. But the way this is structured, it almost feels like one of those Pokemon Adventures of Pikachu shorts that used to be paired with Pokemon's theatrical movies to pad their runtimes. Especially as Rush Online then acquires a Moko Loco companion that's likewise a misfit for a short bit. But because this episode is so much the misadventures of Rush, and I find Rush to be a nuisance a lot of the time, there's not much to recap this time outside of sight gag. And if you want the play-by-play on that, just watch the episode itself, quite frankly. However, amidst this, there have been repeated power failures throughout Akihara, with Neto taking the initiative to find out the cause.
勝手に発電所のサイバーワールドを調べたりしていいのかな？いいの！俺たちはネットセーバーなんだから。それに、停電の原因を見つけないと宿題ができないんだ。
He's being serious. That's a comedy subplot in this episode. Oh no. These bubbles are redirecting power to another source, Rockman following them, and finding the only remaining undeleted Darkloid, the long-absent Bubble Man, who is using the stolen power to try and revive the damaged Shade Man. But because Bubble Man attacked Rush's Moko Loco friend, Rush has a bone to pick with him. You know what? I'm gonna give it to the episode. Rush, who annoys me, beating up a character I despise? This should normally make me hate the episode for bringing them in, but if Rush were here, I'd give him head pats for actually making the attempt. Owned by Bubble Man. Bubble Man! How? This is where Rockman arrives and sees what's happening. Bubble Man taking the shots Rockman hits him with, all to protect his goal that is achieved by this machine. But with all sides withdrawing after it's smashed, Rush returns his Moko Loco companion to their herd and decides, yeah, it's time to return home and see if he can't fix things up. As by this point, Male has learned that yeah, her little Shirone is actually the cause of all the thrashing that was earlier blamed on Rush. Probably needs a black cat companion to keep this one out of trouble. The wrap-up. We have cats and dogs living together in mass hysteria! To how this episode got started. We have Sheep Dog, to Rush's companion with the Moko Loco virus. We have I Know Kung Fu, for Rush's mastery of nunchaku. And we have always remember to save your work. Neto in this episode had a side gag about the power failing every time he's about to save his homework, thus has to keep doing it over and over again. Once more, this being a counterpoint to the writers who keep treating him like an imbecile. I was a good student at Neto's age, and I still had this happen to me several times. Up to and including when I lost my term paper in college, thanks to a PC failure. Hell, Neto tries several times to save his work, only for the power to fail at the second he's going to save. And lastly, we have failed revival. Bobaman's plan was to use this power to bring back Shademan from near death. It fails. This episode is ultimately harmless, though as I speculated last time, it was likely skipped for time because it neither ties into nor affects anything in telling the longer story arc of the series. Besides me not liking Rush or Bubbleman, thus me not really caring for what happens to them, nothing else insults anyone or acts offensively. It's just a misunderstanding that leads to shenanigans. And that's no reason to be a grump about it in the long term. Especially with the main plot of the series now getting back on track with its conclusion. Honestly, it feels a bit like a 2.0 version of the Good Dog Rush story from the first season, but without all the things that made that one frustrating, long-term impact that one had or not. But nothing of importance happens here, so even now in a watch-through of the series, it is easy to skip. You know what time it is? Boss rush time! Some of you have probably been wondering what Enzan has been up to for quite some time now. Well, while everyone's been busy with other things, Enzan's been focused on trying to determine just where the hell Regal's been hiding so they can finally bring the fight to him. But while they've searched everywhere feasible on Earth, Enzan finally realized, hey, what if he's not on Earth, but in a satellite in orbit that they already know Nebula has, thanks to all the dimension converters it launches? He correlated transactions Raoul managed to track down from the underworld markets, with them all going to and from a manned satellite, which has been receiving payloads that have been launched in ultralight capsules off of tankers that are all in Regal's name. All they need to do then is track him down, because they've lost track of said satellite's flight path since Regal cloaked it a long while back in the early side of the series. So first they have to find a way around that, which they go to see Yurichiro to see if he has a way to do so. Also giving us the first sign that Yurichiro's actually made progress in making a vaccine program that'll erase dark souls from Navis and restore their corrupted programs. And yes, Yurichiro also does have a way to get around the satellite's stealth field, and that's by shooting infrared rays into empty pockets of space, since the satellite's stealth field only really works off of visual means of tracking. After the entire orbit of everything has been mapped by those infrared rays, all it would take is sorting out the orbits of every known satellite, and the remainder would then obviously be the targets to look into. Made simpler in this respect by another old plot point. The satellite guidance system Control-X, that was previously said would be able to detect them, which is why Regal attempted to destroy it before, and the Netplace have kept it under guard ever since. Enzan gets access to it for this task, Aneta coming by to help out, and feed him oddly looking and yet somehow delicious snacks. But with Control-X being brought out of mothballs, the Netplace's detectives all gather, just expecting Regal and Regal to try something. Ryuk even called in to assist just to pad out their forces. But it's not like they need to worry. I mean, who does Nebula even have left? I doubt Laserman, Needleman, and Dark Blues will be able to wreck all of this before they've got the satellite pinned down. What else could he possibly have?
目覚めるがいいお前たち。復活の時は来た。再び戦慄と恐怖をもたらすため。さあ、蘇るのだ。
Oh crap. Also, again, why is Bullman there? While it was ambiguous whether Bullman was a Bully Alley mascot that was forcibly infested with a dark chip or a full Darkloid, well, quite frankly, that story works better if he wasn't originally a Darkloid with regards to the longer arc of the series and just another of their victims. Still, them being assaulted by literal ghosts in the machine with this revived army pretty much puts the assembled at a massive disadvantage, as they could barely beat these guys with numbers when they were fighting solo. It's infinitely worse by them all being together. Meaning, Neto can no longer hold back. It's soul time. Yeah, it kind of becomes like shooting fish in a barrel when you're lined up like that and not holding back. Still, their sheer numbers make it so some start getting through while Rockman and Searchman are occupied. The newer soul forms allowing easier advantage against old enemies like Video Man, alongside some of them just getting sloppy like Gravity Man is. Or otherwise being useless as they always were in case of Bright Man. Roll Soul is, of course, the best. Forte, however, is watching all of this for some reason, using the gospel robot to hack into the police system for his own goals, and for some reason going down to the depths of the internet while they're occupied in order to revive Shade Man. So, why? Why is a very good question to ask here. It could potentially be payback for giving Allegro the data needed to create dimension areas. Maybe Shade Man contacted Forte a while back for an exchange of such. Maybe they've been in contact for a while since Shade Man's own dimensional area generators were made at the former World 3 base, so you'd think Forte would have access to it. Hell, it might even tie into Forte's anime original Pharaoh Man backstory. The problem with it, though? They don't explain it! Still, while the souls buff Rockman's stats, the constant fighting exhausts Searchman, leaving him out of the battle and Rockman alone to fight, as a dimension area finally brings in Dark Blues. Rockman does manage to finish off the last of them with Beastman dying to Blue's soul, but with Rockman tired as well, that leaves the performance of their crossed fused form much lower than the current standard. However, it's too little too late. Enzon has succeeded in determining the orbit of Regal's satellites. And while Dark Blues does destroy Control-X, Aneta, because she was assisting Enzon all this time, was able to remember the final bits of the code sequence Enzon needed to pull up the completed orbit data map of all satellites circling the Earth. Oh, Blues will report success in destroying their means of finding them, but only after it was too late. And to think, she only joined with them because they tried to use a traumatized girl as a means by which to take Blues from Enzon. Nice fixing it, villain! The wrap-up. We have Brawl for it all, for this entire episode's plot. We have Cosmic Faceplant to all the revived Darkloid Navis. Yeah, their ghost data respawns and that's why they're weaker, but if you've played the games, you know that normally fighting ghost data means they're stronger, not weaker. This fits how Rockman and Neto have grown much stronger over the course of the series to be able to do this, but it's still a shock to see so many enemies that put them in deadly situations go down faster than any character that can't take a punch. This ends up feeling like Glass Jaw syndrome on a whole different tier for the Net Police's mass production Navis, for them to be that useless, and then the Darkloids in turn being completely incapable of fighting back against Rockman's use of Soul Unison and Searchman's Scope Gun. And we have Last Minute Save, for Aneta and her remembering the code sequence that gives us Regal. Not much more to say about this, as it begins the final push of the series with Regal's machinations beginning to bite him as his pawns are all gone. His hiding place has been found, and his subversion of the heroes no longer as effective with the vaccine against his dark chips being on the way. But he's not completely out of cards to play yet, as we will see next time when Neto and company chase after him out into space. How could they possibly get there, I wonder? So after replaying the last few minutes of the prior episode, because time filling, we get to the military of the world plotting how to deal with Regal's satellites, and then deciding to use defensive assault satellites, only for all of them to be shot down via defenses the satellite has. Though amidst this, Neto's seen gathering together with some old friends outside of a closed hot spring. You smell that? That's the smell of continuity being invoked. Yeah, Neto, expecting that Regal would in turn expect all of Earth's defense satellites to turn on him the second he was found, contacted Yaito and Takao so they could use Yaito's resources to get at Regal's satellites from a different angle of attack Regal would not expect. Probably should have told him what he was doing first so he could get approval, though. Still, sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, and this is a case where they have no better options, so might as well go ahead with it. Still, this is why I didn't get so exasperated when the shuttle appeared before. It was ultimately set up for this event, and laying the pieces in place early so they could be used later. Though, why isn't Enzan with them despite the asset the battleship gate is to their counterattack? Well, you see, Yaito happened.
言っちゃったカルフォルニアロールでも食べてればいいのよ。エンザンこれはバチよ。そういうことだったんだ。相変わらずすごい情報も。
Yeah, you can once again see why getting rid of the wealthy brat was an asset. And another sign of why basically every fan who was watching adopted the anime reinterpretation of Aneta so openly. No one I know of, or even knew when this series' release and translation was more active, actually liked Yai because of how much of a spoiled brat she was and remained, alongside the nonsense her presence caused by proxy. But the thing is, from a character perspective, it totally makes sense for her to do this, and resultantly have the story exclude Enzan and Aneta from this fight for this reason. So, I'm not going to hold it against the story for doing it. No, I'm holding it against the completely in-character individual that did it. The fact that doing this actively endangers all of their lives later is just icing on the cake cementing that viewpoint together. This is also where Junkman re-enters the picture, having built a collection of friends from the space junk he's collected since he was last here, having briefly seen Regal's satellites and coming under attack from it. It scatters the junk so that it by proxy hits Yai's shuttle. Junkman realizing his friends are near and asking for help recollecting his junk friends, as Junkman's a bit too weak for the prior attack. But to deal with that, well, Junkman gives up the last Bell Network 4 Soul Unison, and the second to last one Rockman gets in the series. With it, the series describes the power of Junk Soul as the ability to control electromagnetic fields, which not only removes the junk in their way, but allows Rockman to erect an electromagnetic field around the shuttle so the particle beams of Regal's lasers are completely deflected from it, allowing them to approach the satellite. As a second defense, however, Regal brings up a dimensional area, but it's too late to prevent the kid's entry, and Neto being able to cross-fuse permits him an actual mobile spacesuit with which to enter the station. With Regal's open invitation in? Not like there's much option there, not with literally thousands of viruses present outside to deter them trying anything funny. A cool detail to note with this whole episode, anytime they have something going on out in space, say that scene of Neto crossing through the ship-to-ship bridge, most of the audio you'd normally expect to hear is outright muted. It is acknowledgement of this often forgotten thing that space does not transmit sound, as sound requires matter to, transmit the vibration of it. Thus, while it's not complete silence, it's as close as you're likely to get to seeing it done. Anyways, Neto boards the satellite and makes rapid advancement to Regal's command center, where Regal greets him courteously before sicking dark blues on him. And unfortunately, he was expecting a largely different fight than this, thus did not slot the right chips, and Neto is easily overwhelmed. However, Dark Blues' playing with his food is once again to his disadvantage, as Rockman and Neto's refuting of Blues' condemnation of humans with how much Enzan truly wants his friend back awakens the Blues soul saved within Rockman, countering the power of Blues' own dark aura, and partially reverting him to his previous state of being. something completely beyond both his and Regal's expectations. This sends him rampaging, Regal ultimately deciding to cut his losses and dispersing the dimensional area, as Regal's already made all the preparations he needed for this to be Neto's grave. The satellite suddenly thrusts down into Earth's gravity well outside of a stable orbit. Fortunately, his friends are there to bring him a spare suit, but the acceleration of the satellite results in Yai's shuttle coming free, and the kids are instead trapped inside. However, it's actually Junkman that ends up saving them, sealing his collected junk around the station to protect it from the heat of re-entry, and bringing them all down safely into the sea. With the recovery of the satellite, that means Scilab finally has fully functioning live dimension converters to figure out how to work the system properly, and also more clues to explain what Regal's ultimate scheme was that would lead to him abandoning his base so freely. But all of that is still to be seen later in the arc. The wrap-up. We have I've Got Soul, to Junk Soul's last-minute gain, which makes sense. Junk Soul's the most useless relative to the others in that it requires junk, debris, and objects, so leaving it for this works. We have 11th Hour Rescue, to Junkman of all characters. We have You Can Come Home Again, to the exchange Neto, Rockman, and Blues have, which shows his dark soul can be filled with light! Once again. Once more, not much to say. The arc episodes are being direct and to the point, with not much critique as all the parts of this culmination have been set up in advance. While every writer part of the season is taking part in this arc, it seems less like their individual problems are getting in the way, as they have no time to get in the way. And I think Araki might have gotten sick of some of the crap they've been pulling, as we've not had an outright bad episode since Sekijima's last outing. But there's still 4 more episodes to go before the season closes, and we've got a few major story points to clear up first. Starting, of course, with the confrontation we've been waiting to see for much of the season, between Mariko and Yuriko. Yuriko makes her way into a shopping center as covertly as possible to pick up supplies, only to run into a fully recovered Goro Misaki. She causes a scene to try and get away, but Goro's just that good that she doesn't succeed, blindly stepping straight up to Mariko, who sees her clearly for the first time, and who can't deny that that's her sister. Well, so much for that antagonist. Funny thing though, as I said, we're out of episodes that got skipped in broadcast. This did, unedited, make it into US airings as far as I can remember, right alongside the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise, which 4Kids was actively downplaying any existential sign of death from any interpretation of their dub, which really doesn't work to try and deny it that hard. It actually contrasts this show as being far better dubbed by comparison as the nonsense rapidly declined as it went along, and was non-existent at this point. As Yuriko being dead before and dying here again, that was directly being addressed. As the Yuriko Mariko knew, died in a plane crash when they were kids 15 years ago, which she and her mother only just missed being on because Mariko fell ill and had to stay behind while Yuriko went on with their dad to never be seen again. Or so she thought. The plane they were in having been hit by a falling meteor out of the blue, and the remains and black box having shown the entire vessel having been torn apart, with them never finding several of the bodies. This whole series of events, of seeing the face of who could only be her sister, has been festering in the back of Mariko's head all season long at the possibility, could it have been true that she lived? Yeah, corpse zombie. Well, okay, she's just not shrugging off being hit by a car and is still injured. but something is keeping her going and allowing her to regenerate from that in a sheerly inhuman manner. This is also why I didn't have any complaints about some of the sight gags from a few of the comedy plots she was part in. I knew this was coming, and acted as a retroactive continuity moment for them to show, yeah, it wasn't that heavy a comedic exaggeration for her to not be significantly harmed from physical trauma. She's just that durable in regards to it. She makes her way back to her hideout not that far into the subway system to rest, while the kids in Higure try to keep Mariko's mind off the incident by taking her on another onsen trip for her hot springs club on Yai's Yen. However, as she rests, Yuriko can't help but recall the memories of her youth from coming in such close contact with her sister, and Regal cannot have that.
過去の記憶は引き金となり、心に迷いが生じたか。
いえ、記憶が戻ろうと、私の忠誠心に変わりはありません。
忘れるな。
Probably because we've had signs that she's had them back for a while. I mean, to repeatedly impersonate her, she's had to have known who Mariko was. It explains Yuriko's hesitation in prior moments, her dwelling on seeing her each time before disappearing. Being as unsettled as she is, it makes the most sense that she is known for a while. And even if that moment in this episode was the first one she got back, one could say the subconscious never forgets and she's been reacting on an impulse of familiarity. Also, her being neutral in this, despite actively helping Regal, there's an explanation for that tied to Regal's part in even creating the Dark Chits to begin with, but we're not quite there yet. The short version of that? Duo has been set up for a lot longer than you might think.
私とお前は下等な人間どもとは違う選ばれた存在だということをな。お前に帰る場所はないのだ。
分かっております。
To that end, Regal provides her with a perfected dark synchro chip for her personal use, attached to an order to murder Mariko to cement her loyalty and role with no attachment to this world. She recovers Needleman by hiding in Goro's car to get it from him. Oof. Dude forgot Zombieland Rule 31. Always check the back seat. And with the gun pointed at his head, Yuriko orders Goro to drive her straight to Mariko, who is busy telling the collected more about the accident, and that it happened during a meteor shower. The same meteor shower that shows up cyclically every so often, that is happening again not much longer into this year. For as Yuriko explains, her immortality, it's not. Not really. An interplanetary probe happened to be in that meteor shower, and when it saw the plane crash, it chose individuals from it to act as its observers, bestowing Yuriko with great regenerative abilities. So, less corpse zombie, more Marvel's Laura Kinney. The regeneration is not limitless, just long enough for her to live through the probe's return with its controller, Duo.Exe, and for it to meet again with two members of the crash it saved, Yuriko herself and Dr. Regal, both of whom would act as agents for it to observe humanity for it to then determine their fate upon its next return. But as I've said, every time she encountered Mariko, her memories came back bit by bit, and that has tainted her as an observer in her intended duties. Though one could also say her own actions as part of Nebula have already disqualified her from that. Except, of course, for one interpretation of their actions, as all of this being a test concocted by the two of them to test humanity's worth for Duo, taking on the roles of villains to see if humanity and the greater world are worthy of life and salvation by resisting the temptation of the Dark Soul and the raw power it makes its user drunk on. This would then allow them to observe the actions that would result by setting up the sides against one another, one corrupted, the other resistant, and see who wins in the end. And objectively, well, besides Blues being contaminated, we've clearly already seen a clear winner beyond Regal's own plans that reach beyond that role. But unfortunately, that's not the route that is eventually taken with this. Beyond that, their contact with aliens also explains why Regal, in addition to his own genius of course, would have the know-how to develop the dimensional area technology in advance of anyone else, if it's something he got the gist of from pre-existing alien knowledge and technology facilitating his development of both the hard light hologram tech and the matter conversion technology that's likewise made use of to transmit physical objects into data and back via use of those fields. While it doesn't resolve every plot hole in the series around them and any origin for them, besides that, as I've said before, being due to the bad writers for the show being wildly inconsistent about respecting the rules to such, it still, nonetheless, supplies expanded content to where such probably originated. As for Yuriko's dilemma on why she didn't defect, well, would Mariko even accept her back after it's been so long? No. Best to leave the connection as dead as she can, lest it hurt either of them or be used against them, as it is being now. My personal interpretation of how she's acting is she didn't want this, and was trying her best to cover up that fact that she does still care, simply so it wouldn't result in Regal ordering her to kill Mariko. But now he has, and this is her confession of what she's done, of what Regal's doing, and what Wiley did. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that part, what with Regal being Wiley's biological son in the games. Anime version? Wiley's the one Yuriko and Regal ended up with after Duo revived them. Elaboration on that is cut off by the police putting up barriers, forcing Yuriko to knock Goro out and take over manually, catching up to Mariko's car and shooting out its tires. The crash leaves everyone disoriented, Mariko thinking for some reason Yuriko's after the kids and not her, but a distraction from Higure lets Goro recover and fight Yuriko for the gun, leaving her with the one option she least wanted to use.
戦え。お前は私には運命には逆らえんのだ。
ダークシンクロチスロットインクロスフュージョン。
She begins to rampage, play acting being influenced by it, even as Blues observes that she's immune to the Dark Soul corruption. Mariko forced to watch her student and sister fight, but Goro realizes what this really is. Her engineering her own demise, as the gun Yuriko held up to Mariko was empty. For the only way she'd ever escape Nebula's grasp and Mariko would be safe is if she failed and died in battle.
もうやめてお願い
早くその女を始末しろ命令だぞ
ブルース貴様
なら俺が始末してやる
お前に帰る場所はないか
裏切り者死ね
Suffice it to say, Mariko's had a day. The wrap-up. We have a Lazarus of the Week for Yuriko Ozono. We have heel face turn, also for Yuriko deciding to save her sister from the order to assassinate her, even at the purported cost of herself. We have final appearance upgrade for Yuriko gaining cross-fusion. And we have past the moral event horizon, to Dark Blues actually killing someone. Or at least, appearing to. Yeah, spoilers for those who never got to stream, Yuriko and Goro are not dead. Her regeneration kicked in again to save her life, and she dragged Goro to safety with her. Though as far as any of the cast know, she was treated as dead before she came back. I did see the episode where they reconciled more recently just to check the details, and at no point does the knowledge of what's done later negatively influence this episode. And that's because this entire story is one big morality play with its tension centered on one question that is being asked throughout it. What will Yuriko decide to do? Play slave to a master gone mad? Or are the positive bonds forged in blood thicker than the chains of a slaved fate? And in the end, Yuriko answers that even if her choice leads to her death. And that is how she dies free. That she survives merely makes so that her following actions are part of a longer redemption arc in penance for the part she played in this season. But in the short term, Blues' actions have now made him the largest stumbling block to resolving the Nebula case, so it's time to finally put focus on addressing him in this saga. Unfortunately, the writer tapped to doing so. Sekijima. Prepare for shenanigans. Scilab completes its version of the dimensional converter tech, with them 100% free of NetNavi abuse thanks to the data and hardware they recovered from Regal satellites, allowing them to finally get around that one flaw in them. Even better, the vaccine chip is ready for public testing, meaning they've got good odds on both being used to bring Blues back to normal. A plan is being put together, Neto telling Enzan in person. However, with what Blues just did, Enzan's stuck on the possibility that Blues might be too far gone. Not helped by the memory of loss that learning of what he did invoked. For it is here, in a Sekijima episode, that we first get Enzan's big backstory for the .exe anime. And it is a doozy. For as this backstory goes, the reason we've not seen Enzan's mom, she died when he was young, and with his father busy running IPC, and generally him being a jerk face, why is it this is the relationship and characterization that Sekijima gets right? I mean, it's still extremely harsh and should turn off a very young Enzan from having any positive relationship with his father, but a lot of this we can still put on the Battle Network 3 interpretation of the kid, just wanting to earn his father's approval with all the work he does put in to being the best he can be at everything relevant to him, and not lose that connection like the one he did with his mom. Personally though, if it were me, I'd have never forgiven him for being that cold. But a fear of loss of people important to him has been a consistent factor throughout Enzan's arc regarding Blues going evil, and a motivation to why he needs to save him. So while he's torn because of what's happened, Neto's reassurance that they're going to make it through this is actually helpful? The issue, of course, being that it's delivered in that same idiot manner that Sekijima always writes him in. That nothing bad is going to happen because we won't think of what could go wrong. Not that they won't let it go wrong, as is the actual reassurance. That their efforts will make sure it works. Not that it'll work because I won't consider failure an option. It's once more the difference between someone being brave and enduring through tough odds, and someone recklessly charging through an event and somehow managing to not cause collateral damage. Still, Enzan is truly touched that they're all pulling to help bring Blues, their collective friend, back from the brink. That it's not just important to him to have him back. Thus they lay the trap, sending out an email they expect Blues to intercept about them having their own converters ready, and have Neto wait for Blues to show. Only for Enzan to realize something too late. The vaccine chip was prepared to counter the infection of normal dark chips that corrupt the Navi outside in, not one like the one that affected Blues, which corrupted him inside out, meaning the vaccine might not work, and he races into the trap ready to intervene. Then again, it is a very good question to ask why he wasn't in there already. Enzan's the only one that can use the battle chip gate to send Neto extra battle chips, which he'd need to have a proper advantage with which to pacify Blues long enough for the vaccine chip to even work to begin with. If this is the first active test of the completed vaccine, of course you're not going to want to test it on a subject that's at full health, regardless of the abnormality of Blues' dark soul. Blues arrives, with Neto ready to face him down, as the converters here, they work fake shells. They're actual converters acting as a second field inside the first, with the other Navis destroying the warp gate from the Nebula's version converters, which prevents Blues from being able to log out of the system and trapping him within the real world. So, what happens to his program if both converters fail? And why have gates like those not been addressed or attacked before to seal off Darkloids from escaping? It's almost as if this was something created and made part of the lore out of nowhere just for this episode, without consideration for what that means in the grand scheme, and how that reads negatively against all previous fights retroactively if that was an option for attack. Now, again, Kenichi Araki previously filled this plot hole about the converter control cores not being as easily destroyed as Searchman initially made them out to be. But this seems like just as much a cop-out when it could just as easily been said that the second dimensional area messed with his ability to log out because he didn't have access to the Scilab converter network as the Navis were protecting it against Axess, since the episode already is showing off their version of the field. And their version of the field has no reason to exist if it's not doing anything for the plot. And now thanks to this side excursion to destroy this gate, which apparently could have been done at any previous time, which is also not how logging in and out of the servers has been shown to work before in this setting, so yeah, even an episode that has to be getting overseen heavily by Araki to not screw up the season's climax, Sekijima is still contradicting crap. It consequently makes their grand plan seem far less effective in their complete shutdown of Blues' options, and instead far more contrived. Especially since, suddenly, regular attacks from the two suddenly now affect the dimensional area barriers when they had not at any point before this. Seriously, we've seen all sorts of impacts and damage hit these things to no effect, but suddenly they do affect them? Admittedly, that specific field Blues is attacking is created by the one Scilab made, and could be weaker due to interference from creating one field inside the other. But the problem with that is, there's no time given to explaining it. You're just expected to accept it's possible against all prior evidence that says, no, he shouldn't be able to do that. All they do is blame the power of his Dark Aura, which 2 episodes before, Neto suppressed just by physical contact, which Neto then stupidly attempts, only with him missing the fact that it required physical contact, and he knows that! You don't get points for an idea that would work in context, but doesn't only because it's done in contradiction to how it worked before. Like, there's a reason the fist of morality is a trope, people. Sometimes someone will not snap back to themselves, especially if they are under evil influence, until you beat the crap out of them. Hell, they even said the plan was to fight Blues to the point the Dark Aura is weakened. And as written, Neto's not been fighting. Neto's been dodging and tanking attacks, which have done nothing to weaken Dark Blues' Dark Soul. They were doing better at this when they were actually physically hitting him. So again, why are they not hitting back? That attack also somehow shreds the cross-fusion armor, and don't even ask me how that even works. The suits aren't supposed to break down like that. But somehow, inexplicably, this begins to work, and the Dark Aura in the attack is suppressed. But when they try to use the vaccine chip on Blues, it unsurprisingly does not work, because it was only the Dark Aura fueling the attack that was suppressed, not the Dark Aura in Blues himself. Meaning this plan only doesn't work because the cast is being stupid again. Or the writer of this episode deliberately making a good plan into an idiot plot with how badly the plan is executed because they believe the cast should be written as brain dead. Either or. Fortunately, as said, Enzan's the only one not being an idiot, thus brought spares of the vaccine to try again. It doesn't work, merely banishing his Dark Aura, permitting him to try something reckless. Thus forcing Neto to pacify a corrupted crossed-fused Enzan as well, while Enza tries to reach Blues from inside their synchronized state. Thing is, again, while this is supposed to be dramatic and pivotal in regards to Enzan's character arc, well, it runs up against the fact that cross-fusion works because of bonds, and dark chips sever the bond between a Navi and operator unless they're both under the influence of a dark chip. It's why Regal needed to invent a dark synchro chip in the first place, to get around the bond-breaking aspect of the dark chips to begin with, to slave both Navi and operator mutually into the darkness. Thus, this right here, in context to everything done before and everything done after, this should not have worked. Which is really the disappointing thing about this, and I remember the dub doing a lot to patch over this problem, but Enzan making it work through force of will to get his partner back. Here, in the original version, not so much. It works because it suddenly works. the fusion submerging Enzan back into his memories, and that of the empty, broken home, where the dark aura is set to kill him and consume his body, only for the power to force them to reflect on their first meeting, and for how the longest time all they had was each other, which is once again harmed by the recurring visual continuity error of it being shown with Enzan having an advanced metal PET that only released recently, and not when they first met years ago. To be fair in this case, this is a Mindscape dream recollection. Enzan is dying from the damage cross-fusing like this did to him, and it's clear Dark Bruise is screwing with his mental state on top of that. This is a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other sort of error at this point. But that memory of innocence, before Enzan, through his father's influence, became infuriatingly blunt, not only begins to reawaken the true blues from beneath the influence of the Dark Soul, it also reminds Enzan once again of everything he's trying to get back, and hardens the resolve in his heart to fight for it with everything he has. And the Dark Soul can't do anything to that.
どんな姿になろうとも来るな。どんなに心が汚れてもお前は俺の涙。
Metanoia, the resolve to repent by a change in one's heart.
帰ろう。ブルース。ありがとう。ネット。
The wrap-up. We have idiot plots for the execution of the plan to get Blues back, not the concepts of the plan itself. We have Darkness Will Not Go Quietly, the abnormal Dark Soul Blues has being able to generate backups of itself. We have Metanoia to Enzan saving Blues with a hug. Don't get the reference this is invoking? Watch Symphogear. They had a similar scenario play out in their 5th season in 2019. We have Inceptioned to the mental battle Enzan and Dark Blues have for their respective souls. And we have filling his Dark Soul with light! With the dawn finally coming in the end of the Dark Blues storyline. A plot point to consider for later as well. Neto and Rockman are said to be absorbing the power of Blues' dark aura throughout all of this, not suppressing or dispelling it. I'm not sure if that was deliberate, but that's going to come into play far later in stream. It wouldn't surprise me if this specific Dark Soul was a bit more insidious than others, considering the later circumstances around it. Despite that though, this is probably the best episode Sekijima ever did for the show as well. Oh, it still has all of their problems present between the lore contradictions and logical fallacies the cast fall under to make the plot go the way they says it does, despite there being simpler, more consistent means of doing so, literally right in front of them. But the emotional investment in Enzan getting his best friend back carries the weight a lot more than normal. Coupled with the episode not having Sekijima's normal time for the mischaracterization of the cast to roll the idiot ball past the point where a line is crossed, yeah, its positives just barely outweigh its problems to make it passable, if frustrating that a we can only attempt this once plan did not have all the details and backup plans in the event things didn't go to plan available to them in the case it went wrong. As the old saying goes, always plan for failure, even if you don't know what part of the plan might fail. That's just common sense, which of course is so frequently in short supply when Sekijima's involved. At the very least, I don't have to deal with complaining about them again for a while now, because the last 2 episodes of this arc, and Axess as a season, are being headed by Chiba and Araki, and as has been shown, I trust them a lot more with all this. In the aftermath of Blues' recovery, both he and Enzan are put through an intense physical examination, and Enzan consequently put in a medically induced coma to heal. Why? Neto literally took more damage and is treated as being fine. Regardless, they're going to be out of commission for a while. Neto watching over him, which allows Yaito and her to finally meet, with Yaito trying to intimidate Aneta with her extravagant wealth. Which doesn't work, considering Enzan's the heir to a company worth vastly more than Yaito's, whose clan is the Ayano Koji's long-standing nemesis. A Romeo-Juliet romance their tale is not, and her failed attempts at posturing just makes her look that much worse to the audience. Frankly, Yaito's just more intimidated that the girl 3 years at least her senior actually has a respectable body, the one thing she's not going to get no matter what. However, as Laserman deploys more of his data-mining UFOs to steal the populaces of the Net Cities to power more of his dimensional area generators, Bubbleman comes and beats up Rush, abducting him when he's out on an errand with Roll. Finally, this is the first time we've ever seen him have any interest in Rush, period. Yeah, this was a plot actually forgotten to be addressed since Bubbleman stopped appearing for a long time. But with Shademan back, well, it's assumed Forte told them the whole deal with Rush, despite it not being explicable how Forte would even know about Rush's ability to freely transmit himself into reality. Regardless, Shademan was revived in that previous bit with Forte, but this abduction does go unnoticed amidst the UFO mass abduction of Navis on a worldwide scale occurring. None of the allied Navis able to do enough to them, and mass orders to evacuate cyberspace not doing enough to stem the damage. Maylu lets Neto know about Rush's own abduction by forces beyond this, them chasing after via the holes in security Bubbleman left. But too little too late. For as they arrive, they witness Shademan and Bubbleman using a dimensional area core, cross-fusion data, and the battleship creation research matrix at Scilab to convert Rush's data, the only digital being they know of that can freely traverse between both worlds, into a reverse synchro chip, allowing the Navi that utilizes it to freely manifest themselves into the real world without use of a dimensional area. Suffice it to say, when that data is then later copied, tends to be darkened as the threat of the series takes on a whole new tier of world-ending crisis. At the very least, when they were in the dimensional areas, they were contained and restricted to where the fields were set up. Fortunately, Shademan has better plans than getting such petty revenge on them. Regal's a bigger point of ire for him anyways. The vampiric Navi targeting every operation Regal has running on Earth to try and drag the man out. To be fair, it makes the police's job easier, as it's surprising those hadn't been shut down yet as it is, with their owner being the world's most wanted terrorist and their operations making for an easy way to hide them in plain sight. Still, Shademan has no care for casualties at all, so a lot of people are getting hurt. Ultimately though, Regal as Laserman comes out of hiding, merely to taunt him as he's masquerading as a soft light hologram again, due to Laserman's light projection abilities, letting him know that he's back in Japan. Huh, so no wonder Zenigata wasn't understood in that one Lupin special where he tries to order a burger. Is it really that common to misspell that with an A? Still, it kinda shows that Shademan isn't that intelligent a villain if he's attacking this wildly and without thought. Yeah, he's mad, but it seems at the end like he never did put that much thought into this world domination scheme. He thinks he's better than humans and their pet Navis, but everything before this that he got was given to him by a human. Regal pointed this out before, but frankly, as the actual big bad of the series, why should Regal care about the damage he's doing? Still, the damage Shademan is doing has to be stopped. Meijin and Yuriko making plans to trap him within their dimensional areas by placing their generators on trucks to form the field. But to once more show how things got botched in the last episode, the clearly more powerful materialized Navi cannot breach this barrier. He is, however, completely immune to the vaccine chip, because Shademan at no point has been shown ever using dark chips. And the vaccine chip only neutralizes the corruption and dark soul of dark chips, not Darkloids themselves. Still, Neto's there to take the force of the battle off of the adults. Yeah, you've been kinda attacking uninvolved parties. You made this quarrel happen, dude. However, no matter what they try, Shademan just shoves it to the side, actually being relatively gentle on the matter, as all he wants is to just get Regal. The Scilab generators breaking down again as they're overloaded with trying to maintain everything. Before Shademan can deal the finishing blow, however, Regal reveals his masterpiece from beneath Tokyo, having constructed it in secret for a long time. A massive tower that is one gigantic dimensional area converter, which seals the entire world in one massive dimensional area. So, there's this line from .hack.gu, which, amusingly enough, released 2 years after this, that I love to use ironically, but also perfectly describes what Regal just did and what his master plan has been.
Now, the real world is being ruled by the online world! Once we rule the online world with Ida, the real world will be as good as mine! My rule will spread quickly across the real world, eventually allowing me to control people's very hearts! Then, I will be able to create a new world where no one ever fights, and where no one is ever oppressed by another! With the power of epitaphs and Ida, I will create new harmony between reality and online!
And while it is sycophantically megalomaniacal for Sakaki to say the line, here's the thing. With everything Regal's done and been responsible for the last 50 episodes, alongside the breadth of the setting as we see it, Regal actually sells being able to do it. It's actually surprising it took over 100 videos of reviewing the anime to make an overt callback or reference to .hack like this. I've been trying to dial those back. However, the confrontation between Regal and Shademan is a lot shorter than you might think. You sure? Cause we just watched a long montage of you murdering uninvolved civilians as collateral damage in your rampage. But that's not the reason it's a short exchange. No, it's because Regal has perfected his own synchrochips, which will allow him to rule the world as the perfect fusion of man and AI. Even as Rockman and the other still free Navis can hear the cries of all the AI Regal's enslaved to make his perpetual dimensional area field manifest. Subsequently, this fight is a complete curb stomp. Nothing Shademan does doing anything, and for the second time, Shademan is obliterated with no effort.
貴様をデリートしなかったのは無間地獄で永遠の苦しみを与えるため。黙れ！クロスレーザー！
He'll be back. Vampires always find a way. Still, for Regal to do that to a Navi they kept failing to beat? Why the hell has Kenichi Araki not gotten more writing jobs than he has when he can perfectly sell the situations that make lines like that possible? Admittedly, he returned to the Zoids franchise in 2019 with Zoids Wild Zero, and wrote a full third of that series story to rejoin him being one of that franchise's greater architects. But I still haven't even heard of that series before the frickin' pandemic hit. At the very least, though, he is still around and making a positive contribution to media. Using Search Soul, Meijin and Yuriko scan the tower's network and physical structure, and what they're ultimately dealing with is not good. The entire thing is one massive dimensional generator, and also houses the command core to supplementary generators lining the entire planet. The thing is a fortress, by which he can project his Laserman light clones to freely strike anywhere in the world, thanks to the dimensional area's effects, making all the soft light holograms these normally are into hard light holograms like normally happens to viruses and navies, and alone makes the world bow in submission, and says as such in subsequent worldwide transmissions. For he is clearly the superior being. Yeah, the Observer went mad with belief supremacy and broke from his given task. It's not all that surprising, honestly. And he wanted them to fail that test too. Worse, Regal's got more synchro chips. The normal ones this time.
だが科学は戦慄と恐怖を与えてこそその進化を発揮する。見るがいい。
Magic technology? Make my me grow! So yeah, they need a plan and they need it now. Yuriko getting the idea that maybe if they use the holes Bubbleman created throughout the net to bypass their collective firewalls, they might be able to get into the control core at the center of Regal's tower to be able to shut down all the generators. No generators, no giant laser man, no realized laser man, no world destruction and domination scheme. Problem is, doing that is going to take time. Time they don't have with Regal on a direct course to them. Which leaves it up to Neto to do all he can, just to buy time. From this, though, we get an answer about one important thing. Why has Neto never tried to slot in the soul forms for use with cross-fusion? And it's pretty simple. Rockman harmonized with the souls of other Navis, not Neto. Forcing Neto to harmonize with them as well, despite the power-up it does give him with him utilizing the 5 strongest ones he has, is just too draining on top of everything else to be able to fight for long. Similarly to what happened when Neto first cross-fused. The strain is just too much. So while it would be something cool to see, it just is not happening in the anime. Aside from, Juka style, but we're not there yet. I find it a bit funny, though, that of the 5 he chooses, Fire, Metal, Search, Blues, and Thunder Souls, Roll Soul is not among them. Not just because of its healing ability that would help alleviate the strain, but from the Roll Arrow's ability to literally destroy or disable chips being used by the enemy. Which, had that mechanic been implemented as an ability in the anime, would have probably been too broken in this environment, as it would mean Roll would instantly have the power to destroy and heal the damage of dark chips. And in a situation like this, disabling all the synchro chips Regal's using for his super duper mega maxi powered up form, it's not a plot hole as they never introduced Roll Soul or Roll herself having that ability in the anime. It's just funny to think about how easily a lot of situations in all this would have been resolved much more simply if they had more liberally used the literal first Soul Unison form Rockman got in the series. Because as always, Roll Soul is best Soul. As you'd expect though, Neto and Rockman fighting a kaiju with the power of the soul forms, yeah, I don't care what anyone says, this fight is awesome. But every use, no matter how short a time, more and more drains Neto. Every strike weakening him, until he can't even move to defend himself, or anyone else. It's only thanks to the intervention of Rika and Enzan, the latter having managed to get Blues to wake up in his recovery pod, that Neto isn't just crushed underfoot, and takes over distracting Regal so they can recover. Followed up by Rika himself going to help Yuichiro, suggesting they use the same system Searchman uses to breach the barriers of cyberspace to connect to Regal's tower, calling in Neto's friends to assist Searchman's assault on their network and its masses of guard viruses.
Sonic Boom! Blink! Ink! Aqua! Bamboo Sword! Element Sword!
But unfortunately, they're out of time. And as all their friends are fighting for their lives, all Neto and Rockman can do is lay there, listening to the voice of the captured Navis crying out for help, knowing they're all out there fighting for them, and because Neto burned through the soul forms, he was forced in greater harmony with the powers of various Navis, thus opening himself and Rockman up to the powers of even more beyond that as well. And with all those trapped Navis being the ones to power the dimensional areas, well, Deus Ex Machina is in play.
僕たちに力をイーガルと戦う力を
お前はロックマン光ネット
ネット君とロックマンのシンクロ率が異常に高い数値を。完全なるシンクロ。そう、フルシンクロだ。
This is the closest the anime ever gets to showing off Saito style, with full synchro's power doubling taken up to an insane degree, with Neto now able to just pummel Laserman with the power of thousands of Navis concentrated, united, into one soul. And it's always great when a show that hasn't used its main theme as an insert theme to use it like this is, at the story's absolute climax. He'll be back. The planet-wide dimensional area collapses, the world returning to a semblance of peace as the meteor storm arrives. Bubbleman coming by and deciding, with all of his companions dead, he's going to reform as he still has Aqua and Iceman, returning Russia's data, which he's recovered for them. However, the largest comet seen in the sky amidst the meteor shower is a far darker tiding of what is ultimately to come. Not that the dub of the series actually showed that to be true, as any further import of the series by that point had been cancelled.
その時地球には新たに竜王の脅威が接近しつつあった。
The wrap-up. We have the Godzilla threshold for Dr. Regal's Rampage, which is also the title of the dub version of the second of these two episodes. We have a villain faceplant for both Shademan and Regal being, well, less than great about what their ultimate goal actually is than the process of them getting to achieving it. For all his plans and build-up, once his scheme reached its fruition, Regal kind of just started being a generic destroy-the-world bad guy, when one could think their submission would lead to it being corrupted to his viewpoint. Especially since that's what Battle Network 5 actually has the man's mad scheme end up being. One could argue that his dark synchro chip made him lose some of his own ability to reason, or he was consumed by the drunken feeling of finally achieving the power he needed for his first goal, and to make sure none would oppose him before cementing his own rule and dominance over whoever remains. And by doing so, prove that the world isn't worth saving to Duo, which I think was the point. But as he stops explaining his goals the second he cross-fuses, that's not exactly clear from just Axess. That is gotten into more in stream, but on its own it's not exactly that strong after the absolutely fantastic build-up we've had to reaching this point. Bad filler episodes and Sekijima's nonsense notwithstanding. We have I've Got Soul, for the one use of full synchro the series features, with the anime incarnation of it pretty much being a world soul form. Likewise, we have 11th Hour Superpower, to both Neto using the soul forms in his cross-fused state despite the strain it puts on him, which I really feel should have been established before this, but whatever, and also to full synchro. We have Come Together right now, for all the heroic allies and even a certain villain uniting to end Regal's machinations. Despite the critiques one could have towards Regal's ultimate goal being to turn himself into a kaiju-sized Navi and wreck stuff, this is a satisfactory conclusion to the season and Dark Lloyd arc of the larger Duo saga, which ended up continuing literally the week after this as Rockman's stream starts itself up, and works to answer many of the lingering questions regarding Regal and Yuriko's larger operation that it left in its wake. As Axess was ultimately planned to conclude and transition like this, it isn't a big deal, but man, when the show got cut off on the American side, that was not a fun time to be a fan, with me scrambling to find episodes of Stream Online, as Wolfpack Productions originally worked on them. As I said in the intro video too, they never finished that fan sub, and it took years for that sub to be picked up again. But I did watch a bunch of the unsubbed ones raw nearly 2 decades ago, and that lack of proximity to the last rewatch I did, and the debut of these videos, is rather telling on the distance between them, as it's now past the point of literally the 20th anniversary of this specific season having aired as I released this video. And yet, with 20 years distance, a lot of this season has surprisingly held up quite well. Yeah, there were a lot of bad episodes in it. Every series and season has bad episodes. But my frustration with the majority of them was they were still built on good ideas and things I was interested in seeing happen, but it was solely because of the way they were written, the idiosyncrasies of their specific writers, and how they treated the cast as part of them, that would ultimately decide if they were good or bad. I fixated as much as I did on the Neto's not an idiot in the way you're insisting thing so much in the recap and review of this season, because there are so many signs and evidence throughout everything that he really isn't how they're depicting him. He's just a 12-year-old kid with the weight of the world on his shoulders, with bigger priorities than the schoolwork that's due. To admit to your limitations is to know yourself and to begin betterment of oneself. And he certainly was on that track much of the time, only for it to be derailed again and again for no reason other than to flanderize him and others, just because a given writer didn't want to stay consistent with anything but their own view. That arrogance, when one is working a collaborative work they're not always part of, is generally harmful. Beyond this, as I said, the animation budget definitely took a step up, and Xebec very well knows how to use their budget appropriately. While some episodes are more clearly cut about and jagged, depending on what episode, it actually ends up accenting the mood. The clipped animation of Fear of Summer Vacation is a personal highlight of that, where the skipping of some in-between frames actually helps sell the insanity of it. Compare it to, say, One Punch Man or Fooly Cooly, where some of the most memorable visuals of them make use of negative color or negative space to flip an expected paradigm in its head when things just get plain nuts. That style helps in this case to sell comedy born from sight gags and interplay correctly. Beyond the humor, Axess has its turn as arguably the most dramatic of the seasons with its use of the Dark Ship subplot. Between the Darkloids literally devolving into zombies writhing in their addiction, to the Dark Blues storyline, to the hopelessness the heroes feel sometimes with the villains ultimately getting away with their plots, and even the physical injury that can result from the fights. While subsequent seasons also have their own serious stories, I think what helps sell it here is the immediate tonal shift that overshadows everything and keeps the larger arc of the storyline engaging as you're never quite certain which way it's going, and not just because of the writer rotation. Seriously, I have a very good track record of predicting the progression of how stories go these days, but even on the revisit and remembering certain parts of the longer arc from my watching of it in 2005, and the skipped episodes a bit past that, well, I was amused by how much hadn't been caught on as being important to later, or remembered where individual stories had gone. The show was not that predictable through many of its events, even if the villain plots usually consisted of a main antagonist plot and subterfuge underlying another plan being regularly made use of. And made use of quite well. I think the difference to things now is, writers are always trying to seed a continuous story arc. Thus, the story beats for those are always apparent and blatant. Whereas back in the day, or even as late as the early 2010s, writers remembered that a bit of downtime filler that allows you to develop differing things was just as important to a fulfilling story. Ultimately, at the end of the day, while fans of the Rockman/Mega Man franchise are going to get the most out of this series, and it somewhat requires you hitting the highlights of the predecessor season to catch all the disparate elements, Rockman.Exe ultimately is a good season of television at the end of the day, and one I was quite happy to revisit.